Section 1. Tonight you are about to step into a forgotten world long before civilization where every night could be your last. The wind carries the scent of damp earth across an endless valley as darkness slowly settles over the landscape. Somewhere beyond the flickering glow of a small fire, unseen eyes wait patiently in the shadows. A distant wolf calls into the cooling air and another answers from farther away. Between those haunting voices you hear something far quieter. A newborn begins to cry. That tiny sound may be the most important sound in the entire valley. For hundreds of thousands of years, long before cities, kingdoms, farms, or written history, human families faced a question that determined whether their people would survive another generation. How do you keep a child alive in a world that seems determined to take them away? The answer was never simple. It required courage that rarely appeared in legends, patience that left no monuments, and love expressed through countless ordinary acts repeated every single day. Before we step deeper into the darkness of tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more calming historical journeys. And before you settle beside the ancient fire, tell me where you are listening from and what your local time is right now. It is always fascinating to imagine people across the world quietly sharing these peaceful journeys together. Now dim the lights and allow your breathing to slow as you leave behind familiar streets, electric lights, and comfortable homes. Instead, you find yourself walking across an Ice Age plain nearly 300,000 years ago, where every sunrise feels like a gift and every sunset brings another quiet test. The evening air grows cooler with every step. Dry grasses brush softly against your legs, carrying the sweet smell of crushed herbs mixed with damp soil. The fading sunlight paints distant cliffs with warm shades of amber before surrendering to deep blue twilight. You are not alone. Ahead, a small group of ancient humans gathers around a carefully tended fire. Their silhouettes move calmly rather than hurriedly. Nobody wastes energy. Every motion has purpose. Wood is arranged carefully. Stone tools rest within easy reach. A bundle of dried roots lies beside woven carrying nets. Near the center of this camp, wrapped tightly inside layers of softened animal hide, sleeps the youngest member of the group. The entire camp seems to breathe around that tiny child. Modern life often celebrates the strongest hunter or the cleverest inventor. Yet here, strength is measured differently. The greatest achievement is not taking a dangerous animal down with a sharpened spear. It is helping a helpless infant survive another cold night. That sounds almost ordinary. It was anything but. Anthropologists generally agree that human children remain dependent far longer than nearly every other primate. Compared with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, human babies require many additional years before becoming fully independent. That unusually long childhood became one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages, even though it demanded enormous sacrifice from everyone involved. You notice one woman gently adjusting the baby's blanket, while another quietly places fresh branches onto the fire. A grey-haired elder sits nearby, watching without speaking. Two teenagers return carrying armfuls of dry wood collected before darkness arrived. No one appears to have been assigned these tasks. Everyone simply knows what needs to be done. Historians and evolutionary scientists continued debating exactly when this remarkable level of cooperative childcare first became common among early humans. Some researchers believe it emerged with Homo erectus nearly 2 million years ago. Others argue it became especially important much later among archaic Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. The evidence remains incomplete, hidden beneath layers of ancient earth that reveal only fragments of forgotten lives. Even uncertainty tells a stone. Stone tools survive. Bones sometimes survive. Gentle moments rarely do. Yet those quiet moments may have mattered most. The fire crackles softly, sending tiny sparks upward where they disappear into the darkening sky. Smoke carries the comforting scent of burning juniper mixed with dried pine. It settles lightly across the camp, helping discourage insects while adding another layer of warmth against the evening chill. You lower yourself onto a smooth stone near the fire. His warmth feels comforting. Nearby, someone slowly grinds dried seeds between two rounded stones. The steady rhythm almost resembles a heartbeat. A child watches with complete fascination, carefully copying every movement using two much smaller pebbles. Nobody interrupts. Nobody laughs. Learning begins long before lessons receive names. Children in prehistoric societies probably absorbed knowledge almost continuously. Instead of classrooms, they had daily life. Instead of textbooks, they had careful observation. Every meal, every journey, every repaired spear, and every shared smile became another quiet demonstration. Perhaps that is why human curiosity became so extraordinary. You watch the youngest children crawling freely within a safe circle around the fire, while older children remain just beyond them. Without obvious commands, the older youngsters gently redirect curious toddlers whenever tiny hands wander too close to glowing embers. No whistles, no shouting, just patient attention. It seems effortless. Of course it is not. Every adult occasionally glances toward the children. The watchfulness becomes almost invisible because it never truly stops. Modern psychologists sometimes call this distributed attention, where multiple caregivers unconsciously monitor young children together. Although prehistoric people would never have used such language, their daily behavior may have reflected something remarkably similar. Survival encouraged cooperation. It rewarded awareness. It rarely forgave distraction. Far beyond the firelight, another wolf howls. This time nobody panics. One hunter quietly lifts his head, listens for several seconds, then returns to shaping the tip of a wooden spear with slow, practiced hands. Experience teaches him that the sound remains comfortably distant. Experience protects everyone, including the baby. You notice scars decorating many faces around the camp. Some stretch across weathered hands. Others cross forearms hardened by years of climbing, digging, and carrying. Each scar tells a silent story. None belong to the infant. That absence represents the achievement. For countless generations, adults accepted risks that children could not understand. They crossed frozen rivers before allowing little feet to follow. They tasted unfamiliar plants first. They confronted dangerous animals while children waited behind protective circles of older relatives. The greatest heroes left no statues. Their reward arrived quietly. A child lived another day. An unusual archaeological discovery from several prehistoric sites suggests that individuals born with physical disabilities sometimes survived for many years despite requiring extensive care. This surprising evidence hints that compassion may have been deeply rooted within ancient human communities far earlier than once believed. Exactly how widespread such care remained is still debated, even. So these discoveries gently challenge the old stereotype that prehistoric life consisted only of constant violence and ruthless survival. Kindness existed too, perhaps more often than we imagine. A cool breeze drifts through the valley, carrying the earthy fragrance of wet moss from a nearby stream. Tiny insects dance briefly through the firelight before vanishing again into darkness. Above, thousands of stars slowly emerge brighter than any modern city could ever allow. The baby stirs. Immediately 3 different adults glance over. One smiles softly. Another quietly adds another hide beneath the sleeping child. A third simply watches. Nobody speaks. Nothing dramatic happens. Yet you realize you have witnessed something extraordinary. Not because of what changed, because of what never stopped. Care. Patient, constant, almost invisible care. For nearly 300,000 years, countless ancient hands performed these same gentle movements beneath different skies. Some camps overlooked frozen tundra. Others rested beside warm African rivers or forest clearings rich with birdsong. Languages changed, faces changed, tools slowly improved. The careful lifting of a sleeping child remained wonderfully familiar. As the fire burns lower, you begin to understand that humanity's greatest invention may not have been stone blades, controlled fire, or sharpened spears. It may have been choosing again and again to protect those who could offer nothing in return except tomorrow. And tomorrow in this forgotten world was worth everything. Section 2. Morning arrives slowly across the valley, not with sudden brightness, but with a pale ribbon of silver spreading over distant hills. Frost still clings to the grass, and each careful breath leaves a soft cloud that disappears almost immediately into the crisp air. The fire from the night before glows beneath a blanket of grey ash, patiently waiting for fresh fuel. The baby wakes before the sun fully rises. A quiet cry floats through the camp. Almost instantly someone answers, not with words, with presence. You notice that it is not necessarily the child's mother who reaches the infant first. An older woman, her dark hair streaked with silver, gently lifts the tiny bundle from its bedding. Her movements are slow enough to avoid startling the child, yet practiced enough to suggest she has repeated this motion thousands of times. The baby's cries soften. A warm heartbeat matters, perhaps more than words. This scene would have looked familiar across enormous stretches of prehistoric time. Although details certainly differed between regions and cultures, archaeologists and anthropologists widely agree that human infants depended upon far more than a single caregiver. Raising one child required many capable hands. You watch the older woman rock the infant while another adult quietly prepares breakfast beside the fire. Nearby, two adolescents leave camp carrying woven baskets. A hunter inspects spear points before beginning the day's journey. Everyone has work to do. Still, nobody seems too busy for the child. That may have been humanity's greatest luxury. Not wealth, not comfort, shared attention. The smell of roasted roots slowly fills the cool morning air. Someone places fresh herbs onto heated stones, releasing a faint scent of sage and wild thyme that mixes with wood smoke. Birds begin singing from nearby shrubs while distant cranes cross the brightening sky in graceful formation. The baby stretches tiny fingers. An elder smiles. The entire camp seems lighter. Modern researchers often describe humans as cooperative breeders, meaning children receive meaningful care from individuals beyond their biological parents. Grandparents, older siblings, aunts, uncles, unrelated adults, and even close companions may all contribute to raising the next generation. Among mammals, this arrangement is surprisingly uncommon. Among humans, it became transformational. Exactly when cooperative breeding reached its fullest form remains uncertain. Some evolutionary scholars suggest it gradually developed as early humans expanded into increasingly difficult environments. Others believe the behavior intensified only after social groups became larger and more stable. The evidence whispers. It rarely shouts. You continue watching as the baby's mother finally joins the elder. Rather than immediately taking her child back, she sits nearby and begins carefully repairing a leather sling made from softened animal hide. The elder continues holding the infant. Neither appears uncomfortable. There is quiet trust between them. Human babies arrive unusually helpless, compared with many other mammals. A young foal may stand within hours of birth. A newborn deer quickly learns to follow its mother. Human infants, however, require years before walking confidently, feeding themselves reliably, or recognizing every danger surrounding them. That vulnerability shaped everything. Families adapted. Communities adapted. Eventually, humanity adapted. The leather sling fascinates you. Its edges are reinforced with carefully stitched sinew. Soft moss lines the inside, creating additional warmth and gentle cushioning. Every stitch reflects hours of patient work completed long before this morning arrived. Historians cannot say exactly how prehistoric baby carriers looked, because organic materials rarely survive thousands of years underground. Leather decays, plant fibers disappear, moss returns to soil. Only clues remain. Stone needles suggest sewing. Wear patterns hint at carrying. Imagination fills the gaps. Even so, many researchers believe some form of infant carrier almost certainly existed. Without one, mothers gathering food, traveling long distances, or escaping danger would have faced nearly impossible challenges. The baby yawns. A tiny hand reaches upward. Sunlight touches delicate fingers. For a brief moment, everything feels wonderfully peaceful. Not every day looked this calm. Storms arrived. Food sometimes became scarce. Predators wandered close. Yet ordinary mornings like this quietly built the future. Across the camp, several older children begin playing with smooth sticks beside a fallen log. One pretends to gather imaginary berries, while another carefully imitates an adult scraping bark from a branch using a rounded stone. Nobody instructed them. They observed. Now they imitate. Learning begins almost invisibly during infancy. Long before children understand language, they study facial expressions, gestures, rhythms, and routines. Modern developmental psychology confirms that babies pay remarkable attention to faces and repeated actions, laying foundations for later communication and cooperation. Ancient infants almost certainly did the same. Different world. Same remarkable brain. A breeze carries the smell of damp leaves from the nearby stream. You hear water flowing gently over smooth stones hidden beyond tall reeds. Somewhere in the trees, a woodpecker taps steadily against old bark. The rhythm blends beautifully with camp life. You notice something unexpected. Nobody hurries the baby. When the infant becomes curious about a shaft of sunlight crossing the ground, the elder simply turns slightly, allowing tiny eyes to follow dancing particles of dust floating through warm air. There is time, at least for this moment. Modern schedules do not exist. Only daylight, only weather, only need. An intriguing idea proposed by some anthropologists suggests that extended childhood may have allowed humans to develop exceptional flexibility. Because children spent many years observing different adults performing different tasks, they gathered a wider range of skills than species whose young matured much faster. Not everyone agrees with this interpretation. Some scholars argue environmental pressures alone explain increasing intelligence. Others believe expanding social complexity played the larger role. Perhaps both mattered. History often refuses simple answers. The mother finishes repairing the sling and finally takes her child into her arms. She gently secures the infant against her chest where tiny ears can hear the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Step by step, she begins preparing for the day's journey. The baby travels too. You realize prehistoric infants experienced much of the world from the safety of another person's body. They felt footsteps through muscle and bone. They heard conversations long before understanding words. They smelled forests after rain, fresh animal, hides flowering, grasses smoke and cooking roots. Their classroom moved every single day. Researchers studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have observed that infants often experience almost constant physical contact with caregivers. While prehistoric life cannot be reconstructed perfectly from modern examples, these observations offer intriguing possibilities about ancient childhood. Historians remain cautious. Cultures differ enormously. No living community perfectly represents the distant past. Still, certain patterns appear repeatedly. Close contact comfort babies. Shared caregiving strengthens groups. Patience creates resilience. Across the valley, the hunting party quietly gathers. Spears rest across strong shoulders. Stone blades glimmer briefly beneath the rising sun before disappearing into leather sheaths. One hunter pauses. He gently touches the baby's forehead. Then he leaves without speaking. No grand farewell. Only quiet affection. The gesture lasts barely 2 seconds. Its meaning lingers much longer. A big noticing that love in this ancient world rarely announces itself loudly. It hides inside practical actions. Someone saves the warmest sleeping place. Someone carries extra water. Someone notices a loose stitch before it breaks. Someone remembers which berries are safe for the smallest hands. Small kindnesses accumulate, like stones building a shelter. As the morning grows brighter, shadows retreat beneath scattered trees. Butterflies drift above patches of tiny yellow flowers, while insects hum softly among fresh green grasses. The baby has already fallen asleep once more, nestled securely against a steady heartbeat as the camp slowly comes alive. Watching this peaceful beginning, you understand something quietly profound. Civilization did not invent childhood, it inherited it. Long before schools, books, or written laws existed, generations of ordinary people discovered that raising one fragile child required patience beyond measure, trust beyond convenience, and cooperation beyond family alone. Those forgotten mornings shaped every generation that followed, including yours. Section 3. The sun has climbed higher now, washing the valley with a gentle golden warmth that softens even the roughest stones. Morning frost has disappeared into the earth, replaced by the sweet scent of warming grass and the damp soil. A light breeze stirs the leaves above, carrying the distant chatter of birds hidden among scattered birch trees. The camp is fully awake. So are the children. Not just one child, many. Some are only beginning to walk, wobbling across uneven ground with determined little steps. Others are old enough to run, weaving around logs and stones with surprising confidence. A few are nearly grown, their movements already resembling those of the adults they admire. Together they form something remarkable, a living nursery. Yet no walls surround it. No fences separate the young from the older members of the group. Instead, invisible circles of attention overlap throughout the camp. Every child seems free to explore but never truly alone. I begin to notice a pattern. A toddler wanders toward the stream. Before the child reaches the water, an older girl gently redirects the tiny explorer by pointing toward an interesting pile of colorful feathers instead. The toddler happily changes direction without protest. No commands, no panic, only quiet guidance. Several heartbeats later, another small boy crouches beside a cluster of smooth stones, trying to lift one far too heavy for his little hands. A broad-shouldered hunter passing nearby kneels for only a moment, demonstrates a safer grip, smiles softly, and continues carrying bundles of firewood. The lesson lasts seconds. Its value may last a lifetime. This is not simply childcare, it is constant education. Anthropologists often describe hunter-gatherer childhood as unusually social. Rather than spending most of their time with only their parents, children regularly interacted with individuals of many different ages. Babies watched older children. Younger children copied teenagers. Teenagers learned from experienced adults. Elders quietly observed everyone. Knowledge flowed continuously. Like water through a river, no single person carried all of it. The smell of roasting mushrooms drifts across the camp as someone stirs a shallow, stone-lined cooking pit. Smoke rises slowly into the clear sky, carrying the comforting aroma of burning oak mixed with fresh herbs gathered earlier that morning. Several children wander toward the food. They stop halfway. No one called them. An elderly woman simply raises one finger. The children children understand. Food is not ready yet. Even before language becomes sophisticated, routines begin shaping behavior. Human children possess an extraordinary ability to recognize repeated patterns. The same gestures performed every day gradually become expectations, and expectations become culture. Culture begins quietly, long before writing, long before kings, long before history remembers names. You settle beside a fallen tree and watch the youngest members of the camp investigate nearly everything within reach. A stick becomes a treasure, a feather becomes a mystery. A smooth pebble deserves careful examination from every angle. Curiosity never rests, neither do the adults. You notice something fascinating. Although the children appear to play freely, every adult subtly adjusts their own movements to maintain awareness. A woman collecting edible roots keeps one eye on nearby toddlers. A young hunter pauses occasionally while sharpening a spear, listening for changes in the children's voices. Even those deeply occupied with weaving baskets seem to know exactly where the smallest explorers have wandered. No one announces responsibility. Responsibility simply exists. Modern researchers studying traditional foraging societies have observed similar patterns of distributed supervision. Rather than assigning one person to watch, every child awareness spreads naturally throughout the community. Each adult contributes brief moments of attention, creating surprisingly effective protection. Historians remain cautious about extending these observations directly into deep prehistory. Conditions varied enormously. Communities differed. Still, many scholars believe early humans likely relied upon comparable cooperation because raising children alone would have been extraordinarily difficult. The evidence fits, even if every detail remains uncertain. A sudden burst of laughter echoes across the clearing. One little girl has discovered that dropping acorns into an empty shell produces different sounds depending upon how quickly she shakes it. Soon several children gather around experimenting with pebbles, sticks, and dried seeds. A simple game emerges. Nobody planned it. Yet everyone learns. One child discovers rhythm. Another notices weight. Someone else begins counting without realizing it. Play hides education remarkably well. Scientists increasingly believe that play served essential evolutionary functions. Through games, children practiced coordination, communication, creativity, and problem-solving without facing the full dangers of adult survival. The lessons felt enjoyable. The consequences were profound. Nearby, an older boy patiently helps a younger child climb onto a low-fallen log. Instead of lifting the toddler completely, he offers only enough support for little feet to find their own balance. The child succeeds. Pride glows across a tiny face. The older boy grins even wider. Teaching strengthened both. The air grows warmer as midday approaches. Cicadas begin their steady chorus from patches of tall grass. Bees drift lazily among clusters of wildflowers, collecting nectar, while children carefully watch without disturbing them. Observation becomes habit. Habit becomes wisdom. A curious scene unfolds near the edge of camp. Two women sit together repairing fishing nets woven from plant fibers. Around them, three small children imitate every movement using grasses far too short for real weaving. Their tiny nets fall apart instantly. Nobody corrects them. Failure cottons is the more. Here. Tomorrow brings another attempt. Modern educators might recognize this as learning through participation rather than formal instruction. Instead of waiting until children reach a certain age, prehistoric communities likely allowed young people to observe and gradually join everyday activities from the earliest years possible. Exactly how structured this process became remains debated. Some archaeologists imagine highly flexible learning. Others suspect certain traditions followed careful customs now lost forever. The ancient world still guards many secrets. A gentle breeze carries cool moisture from the nearby stream. You dip your fingers into the flowing water. It feels startlingly cold after standing beneath the midday sun. Dragonflies skim across its surface with dazzling flashes of blue and green. Several children arrive moments later. None rush directly into the water. Instead, they stop. They look toward an older woman gathering reeds nearby. She nods once. Only then do they step carefully onto the muddy bank. Trust grows through countless tiny moments exactly like this. Children gradually learn which situations require permission, which dangers deserve caution, and which adventures remain perfectly safe. Not through fear, through repetition, through patient example. One fascinating archaeological discovery comes from prehistoric footprints preserved in ancient mud. At several sites around the world, researchers have found the footprints of children walking alongside adults thousands of years ago. These tracks reveal that young children often accompanied daily activities rather than remaining behind. Tiny footprints survive. Tiny voices do not. Still, those silent impressions tell beautiful stories. The afternoon sun begins casting longer shadows across the valley. Adults prepare tools for tomorrow while children continue exploring, inventing games from whatever nature provides. A curved branch becomes a pretend animal. A patch of sand transforms into a map. A pile of leaves becomes an imaginary shelter. Nothing is wasted. Not even imagination. You realize something surprisingly modern. Children everywhere seem to invent worlds across continents, across centuries, across hundreds of thousands of years. The details change. The instinct remains. As evening slowly approaches once more, the camp gathers itself almost effortlessly. Older children help carry bundles of firewood too small for adults to notice, but perfectly sized for young hands. Toddlers proudly transport handfuls of dry grass for kindling, believing they are performing essential work. Perhaps they are. Contribution begins early. Confidence grows quietly. No celebration marks these small achievements. None is needed. Every shared task gently teaches one enduring truth. You belong here. You matter here. Others depend upon you. In a world filled with predators, uncertain weather, and unpredictable seasons, that lesson may have been the strongest shelter humanity ever built. And tomorrow, those same children will wake eager to learn again, surrounded not by a single teacher, but by an entire community patiently shaping the future one ordinary day at a time. Section 4. The afternoon sun settles into a softer glow, stretching long shadows across the valley. Heat rises gently from the earth, carrying the rich scent of crushed grass, warm stone, and drying pine needles. Somewhere beyond the trees, water murmurs steadily over smooth rocks, while insects hum in the tall meadow like an endless, peaceful chorus. The younger children have finally grown quiet, not because they are tired, because they are watching. A small boy, perhaps 3 summers old, crouches beside a woman, carefully scraping the bark from a freshly cut branch. He does not ask questions, he simply studies every movement, his wide eyes following the stone blade as though witnessing a wonderful secret. The woman never announces a lesson. She simply works. The child learns anyway. I begin to realize that this ancient world contains almost no formal teaching. Nobody gathers children beneath a tree and declares that today's lesson concerns toolmaking or gathering edible plants. Knowledge flows differently. It slips quietly into young minds through thousands of ordinary moments. This style of learning fascinates many anthropologists today. Humans possess an extraordinary ability known as observational learning. Unlike many animals, children do not merely copy actions. They try to understand intention. They notice the order of movements, the timing, the purpose, and even subtle corrections adults make when something goes wrong. That ability changes everything. It allows culture itself to survive. The woman finishes smoothing the branch and places it beside several completed digging sticks. Without speaking, she leaves to help prepare food for the evening. The little boy waits and glances round. Then he carefully picks up a much smaller stick. His tiny fingers begin imitating exactly what he has just witnessed. The bark barely peels away. The movements are clumsy. His concentration is remarkable. Nobody laughs. Anne, elder seated nearby, watches quietly with gentle amusement. She notices the child holding the stone incorrectly, walks over without urgency and gently rotates his wrist only a few degrees. No lecture follows, just one careful adjustment. Then she returns to weaving. The lesson lasts perhaps 5 seconds. Its memory may remain forever. Modern developmental psychologists have found that children often learn most effectively when adults demonstrate a skill naturally, instead of constantly interrupting with explanations. Ancient humans, without knowing scientific terminology, may have relied upon this principle simply because it worked. Historians still debate how much spoken language early Homo sapiens possessed 300,000 years ago. Some researchers believe complex language had already emerged. Others suggest communication remained more limited, relying heavily upon gesture, facial expression, and shared experience. The evidence remains frustratingly incomplete. Soft tissues vanish. Voices disappear. Only scattered clues remain beneath ancient soil. You watch several children gathering around a pile of colorful stones collected from the nearby stream. One older girl arranges them in neat circles. A younger child copies her pattern almost perfectly before deciding to invent a completely different design. Imitation comes first. Innovation follows. That sequence may have repeated countless times throughout human history. Every great invention probably began with someone first learning an older method. The breeze shifts, carrying the sweet smell of flowering shrubs. mixed with faint smoke drifting from the campfire. Overhead swallows dart through the sky, chasing tiny insects almost too small to see. A toddler points upward. Several adults smile. One quietly imitates the bird's graceful movements with an open hand. The child bursts into delighted laughter. Even joy. Becomes instruction. Facial expressions teach safety. Smiles encourage curiosity. Raised eyebrows warn of danger. A calm voice restores confidence. Long before written language existed, the human face itself became one of the most sophisticated teaching tools ever created. You notice that children constantly study these tools, not just the words, the expressions, the pauses, the reactions. One little girl reaches toward a patch of unfamiliar berries growing beside a fallen log. Before her fingers touch the fruit, she glances toward an older man repairing a spear shaft. He simply shakes his head, nothing more. The child immediately withdraws her hand. No explanation is necessary. She trusts his experience. Researchers studying traditional hunter-gatherer communities have often observed that children develop impressive awareness by carefully monitoring the emotional responses of adults. Fear, confidence, hesitation, and approval become information as valuable as spoken instruction. Exactly how universal this behavior was in deep prehistory remains uncertain. Different environments demanded different teaching styles. Different groups almost certainly developed unique traditions. Human culture has always been wonderfully diverse. The camp slowly becomes busier as preparations for the evening meal begin. Several women return carrying woven baskets filled with edible roots, berries, mushrooms, and fresh greens. Hunters arrive not with dramatic celebrations, but with quiet satisfaction, carrying a small antelope across a sturdy wooden pole. Children gather immediately, not to eat, to observe. Every successful hunt becomes another lesson. Stone blades are cleaned carefully. The hide is removed patiently. Nothing is wasted. The youngest children stand just outside the circle of work, their curious eyes absorbing every movement. It tells them to memorize these details. Their remarkable brains do that automatically. Scientists sometimes describe humans as cultural specialists because we inherit enormous amounts of knowledge from previous generations rather than discovering everything independently. Without this ability, every generation would need to reinvent survival from the beginning. Civilization would never have appeared. Neither would history. Nearby, two boys use short sticks to imitate the hunters they have just watched. One pretends to stalk invisible prey while the other quietly circles from another direction. The game looks simple. It is preparing future hunters. One of the boys accidentally steps on a dry branch. The loud crack startles both children. They freeze, then they laugh. An older hunter nearby smiles and deliberately steps on another branch, producing an even louder snap. He raises one finger to his lips. The boys instantly understand. Silence matters. Another lesson ends. No speech required. The afternoon gradually fades toward evening. Golden sunlight filters through tall trees, painting shifting patterns across the forest floor. Warm air carries the scent of animal hides drying beside the fire, mixed with fresh cut wood and crushed mint leaves. You find yourself listening as carefully as the children do. Every sound tells something. Birdsong signals calm. Sudden silence deserves attention. Flowing water marks safety. Cracking branches invite caution. The forest itself teaches. Children simply learn how to hear it. One fascinating archaeological clue comes from miniature stone tools discovered at several prehistoric sites. Some researchers believe these smaller implements may have belonged to children practicing adult skills. Others argue they served ritual purposes or fulfilled specialized functions unrelated to learning. The truth remains uncertain. Tiny tools raise enormous question. History often whispers through objects too small to notice. As dusk approaches, families gradually gather around the fire once more. The youngest children settle beside trusted adults, while older youngsters proudly help arrange cooking stones and gather additional firewood. Nobody assigns these jobs. Responsibility grows naturally, like a tree, slowly, almost invisibly. You suddenly understand why ancient childhood lasted so long. It was never simply about growing stronger. It was about absorbing an entire way of living. Every safe plant, every dangerous animal, every seasonal change, every useful stone, every trusted face, every hidden path, every quiet custom. No single lesson could contain such knowledge. It required years, thousands of shared days, millions of patient moments. The baby you met the previous evening, now sleeps peacefully against a familiar heartbeat while older children continue watching, copying, practicing, and slowly transforming curiosity into understanding. Nothing appears dramatic. Nothing seems extraordinary. Yet somewhere inside these quiet afternoons lies one of humanity's greatest achievements. Not the invention of fire, not the shaping of stone, the remarkable ability to pass invisible knowledge from one generation to the next with such care that children eventually become teachers themselves. And so the circle continues as steadily as the seasons beneath skies that will watch countless more children learn without ever realizing they are carrying the future. Section 5. The following morning begins beneath a sky covered with slow-moving clouds that soften the sunlight into pale silver. The valley feels quieter than yesterday. Even the birds seem more thoughtful, their songs shorter, their pauses longer. Cool air carries the scent of wet earth, fresh moss and leaves still holding the night's dew. You notice the children immediately, not because they are making noise, because they are already moving. A little girl, no older than 4, carefully follows her older brother toward the edge of the forest. Their tiny footprints disappear into the patches of damp grass before reappearing across stretches of smooth stone. Neither child walks in a straight line. Curiosity keeps pulling them toward every interesting shape, sound, and color. Curiosity is powerful. So is danger. The adults know this better than anyone. One woman glances towards the children while tightening the woven straps of a gathering basket. She does not call them back. Instead, she nods almost imperceptibly toward a teenage girl sorting bundles of dried reeds. Without hesitation, the teenager rises. She follows, not too closely, not too far away. The younger children never realize they are being protected. That is precisely the point. Human childhood presents a remarkable evolutionary puzzle. Our young are naturally curious, eager to explore every unfamiliar object, every moving creature, and every hidden corner of the landscape. Those instincts encourage learning. Yet the same instincts also lead directly toward cliffs, rivers, poisonous plants, and hungry predators. The challenge was never eliminating curiosity. It was guiding it. You walk quietly behind the children as they enter a stand of birch trees. Their white trunks shimmer softly beneath the grey morning light, while damp leaves release a sweet, earthy fragrance with every gentle breeze. Somewhere overhead, squirrels chatter among branches heavy with fresh seeds. The little girl suddenly stops. Something has caught her attention. A bright cluster of red berries hangs from a low shrub. She reaches toward them. Before her fingers touch the fruit, the teenage girl kneels beside her. She does not slap the small hand away. She does not shout. Instead, she gently points toward another nearby bush covered with dark blueberries. Then she shakes her head at the red ones. The little girl watches carefully. She nods. The lesson is complete. No fear, only understanding. Modern ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherer societies suggest that children often learn about dangerous plants through repeated exposure under close supervision rather than through strict isolation. Instead of hiding hazards, completely experienced adults introduce them carefully, allowing young minds to build reliable memories. Deep prehistory remains impossible to observe directly. Historians debate exactly how widespread this approach may have been. Still, many researchers believe guided exploration offered clear advantages over constant restriction. Knowledge protects longer than fear. The children continue walking. A butterfly drifts lazily across the path. The little boy chases it. His laughter echoes gently through the trees before fading into the quiet forest. Her runs faster. Too fast. His foot catches a hidden root beneath the leaves. He tumbles forward. The fall looks frightening for a brief instant. Then silence. The boy blinks and sits up. His hands are covered with damp soil. No serious injury. Only surprise. The teenage girl waits. She allows him a moment. Then she offers one steady hand. He stands, brushes dirt from his knees, looks carefully at the root. Perhaps he will notice it sooner next time. That tiny stumble costs almost nothing. It teaches balance. Human children learn remarkably well from manageable mistakes. Developmental psychologists have long observed that small failures often strengthen future decision-making provided the environment remains reasonably safe. Ancient families probably understood this without formal theory. Children needed experience, not perfection. The forest gradually grows denser. Moss blankets fallen logs in thick green cushions that feel cool beneath your fingertips. Mushrooms cluster beneath shaded trees, their earthy smell blending with damp bark and rich soil. A soft tapping sound echoes nearby. An elder is gathering edible fungi. 3 children watch quietly. She selects one mushroom, leaves another untouched. Then another. Again and again. Nobody interrupts. Eventually one child points toward a large mushroom growing beside an old stump. The elder smiles gently. She shakes her head. Not this one. Nobody explains what. Not today. Some lessons arrive gradually. Many poisonous mushrooms resemble edible varieties. Archaeologists cannot know exactly which species prehistoric communities gathered in every region yet. Botanical evidence and residue studies strongly suggest that wild fungi formed part of many ancient diets. Exactly how extensive that knowledge became remains uncertain. The forest keeps some secrets, even now. The breeze shifts. You catch an unfamiliar scent. Animal. Strong. Musky. The elder notices it too. She raises her head immediately. Every child freezes. Nobody appeals. Even the forest seems to pause. Several heartbeats pass. Then a distant deer steps quietly between the trees before disappearing once again into the undergrowth. The tension dissolves. Children breathe again. The elder smiles softly. Another lesson. Not every strange smell means danger, but every strange smell deserves attention. Survival often depends upon noticing subtle changes long before obvious threats appear. The group eventually returns toward the open valley, carrying baskets filled with edible plants. Along the way, the little girl pauses beside a narrow stream flowing over smooth stones polished by countless seasons. The water sparkles beautifully. She kneels. Tiny fingers reach toward it. Before she can lean too far, the teenager places one hand lightly against the back of her leather tunic. Barely any pressure. Enough! The child safely splashes the cool water without risking a fall. Protection sometimes feels almost invisible. Perhaps the best protection always does. The sound of flowing water follows you back toward camp. It mixes with distant birdsong, rustling leaves, and the rhythmic knocking of someone shaping wood into new spear shafts. Life continues. Learning continues. Neither ever truly stops. One curious archaeological discovery comes from ancient footprints preserved beside prehistoric lakes and riverbanks. Some sites reveal adults repeatedly walking beside children rather than ahead of them. Researchers continue debating the exact meaning of these trackways. Perhaps adults slowed their pace. Perhaps they offered guidance. Perhaps they simply enjoyed the walk together. Ancient footprints cannot answer every question, yet they quietly suggest companionship. The clouds begin breaking apart as afternoon sunlight returns, warming the valley once again. Children spread across the camp inventing new games with sticks, feathers, and smooth stones collected during the morning. The little boy who stumbled earlier now steps carefully over every exposed root, not fearfully, confidently. Experience has changed him, only slightly. That is enough. Nearby, the baby sleeps peacefully beneath a shelter of woven branches while several older children play close enough for gentle laughter to drift toward the tiny cradle. One child notices the infant stirring. She quietly stops her game, walks over, adjusts the soft hide covering the baby's feet, then returns without saying a word. No adult asked. She simply remembered. Watching this quiet moment, you begin to understand something profound about prehistoric childhood. Teaching did not end with learning how to survive. It continued until children themselves began protecting those even younger than they were. Knowledge became responsibility. Responsibility became compassion. Compassion strengthened the entire community. As evening approaches, golden light settles across the valley once more. Smoke rises lazily from fresh fires while the scent of roasting roots and herbs drifts through the cooling air. Wolves may still wander beyond the hills, rivers remain swift, cliffs remain unforgiving. The world has not become safer. The children have become the children have become wiser, one careful lesson at a time. And tomorrow they will wake eager to explore again, carrying yesterday's quiet discoveries into another day filled with questions, wonder, and the patient guidance that slowly transformed curious little wanderers into capable human beings. Section 6. The sky darkens long before the children feel ready to sleep. Golden light fades slowly behind distant hills, leaving long ribbons of orange resting across the horizon before dissolving into deep shades of blue. Cool evening air flows gently through the valley, carrying the comforting smell of wood smoke, roasted roots, drying animal hides, and fresh pine resin. Somewhere beyond the circle of light, a nightjar begins its soft repeating call. The fire awakens, not because it was ever truly asleep. Throughout the day, glowing embers remained hidden beneath layers of grey ash, carefully protected by those who understood their value. One woman kneels beside the hearth, blowing gently into the ashes until tiny orange sparks brighten once again. Dry grass catches first, thin twigs follow. Soon thicker branches begin crackling with steady confidence. Within minutes, the entire camp gathers, not by command, by instinct. You settle near the warmth, stretching your hands toward the dancing flames. Heat brushes gently across your skin, while cool night air touches your back, creating a comforting balance that feels strangely familiar despite the thousands of years separating you from these people. The children move closer too, not too close. They already know the invisible boundary. No one painted a line around the fire. No one needed to. That lesson began long ago. Control of fire stands among the greatest achievements in human history. Archaeologists have uncovered convincing evidence that ancient humans regularly used fire hundreds of thousands of years before the appearance of cities or agriculture. Some discoveries suggest controlled fire stretches back even farther, although researchers continued debating exactly when consistent mastery became widespread. The arguments remain lively. The flames remain timeless. Without fire, this camp would be almost unrecognizable. Darkness would belong entirely to predators. Food would remain harder to digest, and cold nights would steal precious warmth. Stories might never linger long enough to shape another generation. The fire gives more than heat. It creates time. One by one, the hunters return from checking simple traps placed earlier in the afternoon. Their footsteps remain quiet as they enter the circle of light. They carry only a few small animals tonight, hardly a feast, yet nobody appears disappointed. Every meal matters. Every success deserves quiet gratitude. The smell of roasting meat slowly joins the scent of herbs already simmering inside a shallow, stone-lined cooking pit. Fat drips gently onto glowing coals, releasing brief bursts of fragrant smoke that drift upward toward a sky now crowded with brilliant stars. The youngest children stare into the flames. Their eyes reflect tiny dancing lights. You wonder how many millions of children throughout history have done exactly the same. Perhaps more than any other image, a child watching a fire connects humanity across unimaginable spans of time. Nearby, the baby wakes. A soft whimper escapes the bundle of carefully stitched hides. Before the sound grows louder, an older boy quietly rises from his place beside the fire. He gently rocks the infant's cradle using one foot while continuing to listen to the conversation around him. The baby settles. The boy smiles. Nobody praises him. Helping is ordinary here. Ordinary things sustain extraordinary lives. Modern researchers believe fire dramatically changed childhood itself. A secure hearth extended useful hours beyond sunset, allowing families to remain active. Repair tools prepare food care for infants and share experiences long after daylight disappeared. Night became different. Not safe. Safer. The distinction mattered. A sudden pop echoes from the fire as a pocket of sap bursts inside a burning branch. Several toddlers glance upward in surprise before laughing quietly. One little girl leans forward slightly. Too far. Her grandmother gently touches the back of her shoulder. Nothing more. The child immediately shifts backward. Another lesson remembered. No fear enters the moment. Only trust. It is easy to imagine ancient childhood as a relentless struggle filled only with danger. Yet evenings like this reveal something gentler. Survival certainly demanded constant awareness, but awareness did not prevent affection, humor, or peaceful companionship. I begin listening to the sounds surrounding the camp. Wood crackles steadily. Someone softly scrapes a hide using a polished stone tool. Another person twists plant fibers into strong cordage with slow rhythmic movements. A baby sighs. Children whisper. Wind rustles dry grass beyond the circle of light. Faraway wolves call once again. Nobody rushes to their weapon. The fire changes the balance. Predators generally avoid it. People trust it. Historians still debate whether regular evening storytelling emerged primarily because of fire, or whether storytelling already flourished before nighttime gatherings became common. Some scholars argue language itself expanded through conversations around ancient hearths. Others believe social bonds strengthened first, allowing more complex communication to follow. The truth may lie somewhere between. History often grows through many small changes rather than one dramatic invention. An elder clears his throat. The children immediately become still, not because anyone ordered silence, because they know what comes next. He begins speaking slowly. His voice rises and falls with gentle rhythm, almost matching the steady pulse of the flames. You cannot understand every ancient word, yet the expressions, gestures, and reactions reveal enough. This is not entertainment alone. It is memory, wrapped inside story. He points toward the dark forest. Children follow his hand. I imitates the cautious movements of a deer approaching water. Then the sudden leap of a hidden predator. Several youngsters widen their eyes. The elder smiles. Not every frightening tale exists to frighten. Many exist to protect. Researchers studying oral traditions across diverse cultures have found that stories frequently preserve practical survival knowledge beneath memorable characters and dramatic events. Dangerous rivers become spirits. Poisonous plants become enchanted. Careful behavior becomes heroic. Children remember stories. Stories remember knowledge. No written pages required. Across the fire, a young mother gently nurses her infant while another woman quietly prepares a warm mixture of mashed roots for an older toddler. The smells drifting through the camp become richer now, blending roasted meat with sweet tubers and fragrant herbs crushed between smooth stones. Food nourishes bodies. Evenings nourish communities. You notice older children naturally drifting toward younger ones. One patiently helps a toddler hold a carved wooden spoon. Another quietly shares a favorite smooth pebble discovered earlier that afternoon. These exchanges seem insignificant. They are not. Compassion often grows through repetition rather than instruction. Scientists have proposed that prolonged evening gatherings may have strengthened social learning by allowing children to observe cooperation in a relaxed setting, rather than only during demanding work. Although prehistoric evidence cannot directly confirm this idea, many anthropologists find it remarkably plausible. Fire slowed life. Slower life encouraged attention. Attention built culture. The moon climbs higher above the valley, casting pale silver light beyond the warm orange glow of the hearth. Shadows dance across nearby rocks, stretching and shrinking with every movement of the flames. One little boy quietly asks a question. The elder laughs softly. Instead of answering immediately, he picks up 2 sticks and demonstrates something in the dirt. The boy nods. He understands. Knowledge rarely arrives as a lecture. It arrives through patience. You feel the warmth of the fire reaching your face while the cool night settles gently across your shoulders. The contrast feels deeply comforting. Smoke carries the faint scent of cedar into the clear air before disappearing among countless stars. The baby has fallen asleep once more. Several children leaned against parents, grandparents, and older siblings. Eyelids grow heavy. Conversations become quieter. The entire camp seems to breathe more slowly. Yet the fire continues. Always watched. Always fed. Always respected. One fascinating archaeological mystery involves ancient hearths found at prehistoric campsites. Some contain evidence of repeated rebuilding over generations, suggesting families return to familiar places year after year. Others appear only once before disappearing forever into history. Researchers continue debating why. Changing climates, migrating animals, seasonal movement, or countless reasons now impossible to recover. The fire remembers none of them. It simply burns. As another log settles into glowing embers, you realize the greatest classroom in human history may never have had walls, desks, or written lessons. It had warmth, light, patient voices, curious children, and countless evenings exactly like this one. Around these quiet flames, generations learned not only how to survive another winter, but how to listen, how to care, how to remember, and how to become the kind of adults who would someday keep the fire burning for children not yet born. Section 7. Morning returns wrapped in a thin blanket of mist that drifts gently across the valley floor. The world seems quieter beneath its pale veil. Trees emerge slowly from the fog, their outlines soft and almost dreamlike. Every blade of grass glitters with dew, and the cool air carries the clean scent of wet stone, fresh earth, and distant pine. The camp wakes gradually. Not everyone rises at once. The children stretch sleepily beneath warm hides, while several adults quietly rekindle smaller cooking fires. The familiar sounds return one by one. A stone grinder begins its steady rhythm. Leather creaks as someone tightens a carrying strap. Birds greet the dawn from hidden branches. One voice is missing. A hunter who usually leads the morning preparations remains asleep, recovering from a strained ankle after yesterday's journey. Instead, someone else quietly takes his place. An elder. His hair has turned almost completely white. Deep lines cross his weathered face, and one shoulder no longer lifts as easily as it once did. His walking stick taps softly against the ground as he moves through the camp. He no longer runs. He no longer chases game. Yet every child watches him, perhaps more closely than anyone else. You soon understand why. In this ancient world, strength changes with age. Young adults possess powerful muscles. Experienced hunters know the land. But elders carry something far more difficult to replace. Memory. The oldest member of the camp kneels beside a circle of children already gathering around him. He slowly empties a leather pouch onto a flat stone, revealing dozens of small objects collected over many years. Tiny shells, strange feathers, smooth river stones, animal teeth, pieces of unusually colored flint. The children lean forward immediately. Treasure, at least in their eyes. The elder picks up a feather unlike the others. It is longer, darker, and marked with pale stripes near the tip. Without speaking, he points toward the distant marsh beyond the valley. Several older children nod. They recognize the bird. The younger ones simply stare, Another lesson begins, not through commands, through curiosity. Anthropologists have long suggested that one remarkable feature of human evolution is the unusually long lifespan of many adults beyond their years of raising children. This pattern is uncommon among mammals. Some researchers even propose what is known as the grandmother hypothesis, arguing that older adults significantly improve the survival of grandchildren by sharing food care and experience. The idea remains debated. Not every scientist agrees. Some believe longer lives emerged for other reasons, including cooperation among all adults or improvements in hunting and food sharing. Evolution rarely follows one simple path. Still few question the immense value of experience itself. You watch as the elder places 3 nearly identical stones before the children. Only one produces sharp cutting flakes when struck correctly. The other 2 crumble. Her hands each child a small hammerstone. Nobody receives instructions. Instead, he strikes the first stone once. The sound rings clearly across the camp. The children imitate him. One stone splits beautifully. Another barely chips. The third breaks apart completely. Nobody appears disappointed. The elder smiles. Failure becomes another teacher. Modern archaeologists often discover large numbers of imperfect stone tools scattered beside expertly crafted ones. Some researchers believe these rough pieces may have been produced by apprentices learning under experienced toolmakers. No one can know for certain. Stone preserves mistakes. It rarely preserves conversations. Even so, those imperfect tools hint at patient instruction stretching deep into prehistory. A little boy proudly holds up a badly shaped flake. Its edge is dull, its shape uneven. The elder examines it carefully before nodding with genuine approval. The child beams. Encouragement matters, perhaps as much now as then. The morning sun slowly burns away the mist, revealing distant hills glowing beneath warm golden light. Butterflies drift lazily through patches of wildflowers, while the scent of blooming herbs fills the air. The elder begins walking toward the edge of the valley. Children follow naturally. No invitation is needed. His pace remains slow enough for tiny legs to keep up. Every few steps he pauses, pointing toward animal tracks pressed into damp soil. A narrow hoof, small rabbit prints, the wide pad of a fox. Each track tells a story. The children kneel beside them. Tiny fingers trace ancient footprints left only hours before. One little girl guesses incorrectly. She points toward deer tracks and proudly announces something that makes the older children giggle softly. The elder does not correct her immediately. Instead, he asks another child to compare the spacing between the prints. Soon the children discover the answer together. Learning becomes shared discovery, not embarrassment. Educational psychologists today often emphasize guided learning, where teachers encourage students to solve problems themselves rather than immediately providing every answer. Ancient elders likely never studied such theories, yet practical experience may have naturally led them towards similar methods. Questions inspire attention. Attention strengthens memory. Memory supports survival. A gentle breeze carries the earthy smell of damp clay from a nearby stream. Dragonflies shimmer above the water, their transparent wings flashing briefly in the sunlight. The elder stops beside a large oak whose twisted trunk bears several old scars. He gently touches one weathered mark, then another. The children gather close. I begin speaking. You cannot understand every word yet. His gestures paint a vivid picture. Long ago, lightning struck this tree. Years later, bears scratched its bark. Another season brought heavy snow that split one branch. The tree survived them all. The children run small hands across the rough bark. History lives here, not only in people, in landscapes. One fascinating archaeological clue comes from ancient campsites occupied repeatedly over many generations. Some locations reveal centuries of returning families, suggesting elders may have guided younger members back to reliable water sources, seasonal hunting grounds, or valuable stone quarries remembered across lifetimes. Researchers continued discussing exactly how such knowledge was preserved. Oral tradition, landmarks, shared journeys, perhaps all 3 together. Human memory often works best when tied to place. As midday approaches, the elder settles beneath the broad shade of the oak while children eat roasted roots and dried berries gathered earlier. One curious little boy notices an old scar running across the elder's forearm. He reaches toward it. The elder nods gently. The child touches the rough skin with one finger. No explanation comes immediately. After several quiet moments, the elder begins telling another story. The children listen carefully. The scar becomes a lesson, not a boast. Perhaps it reminds them that bravery sometimes carries lasting marks. Perhaps it teaches caution instead. The exact meaning belongs to the story. The afternoon grows warmer. Cicadas begin singing from tall grasses while soft clouds drift lazily across the bright blue sky. Older children gather fallen branches as younger ones proudly carry bundles no heavier than their own small arms can manage. The elder watches. Occasionally he offers advice. Mostly he observes. Experience has taught him another important lesson: knowing when not to interfere. Scientists studying traditional societies often note that respected elders contribute less through physical labor and more through judgment, conflict resolution, ecological knowledge, storytelling, childcare, and practical wisdom accumulated over decades. Strength fades, insight often deepens. The camp benefits from both. As evening approaches, once more everyone returns toward the familiar warmth of the fire. The elder walks last, his steady pace unhurried. Two children instinctively match his speed without anyone asking them to do so. They carry some of his gathered herbs. He carries their future. Watching them disappear into the soft orange light of sunset, you begin to understand that humanity's oldest libraries were never built from stone or filled with scrolls. They walked slowly across ancient valleys. They remembered forgotten paths. They carried invisible maps inside patient minds, and each day with remarkable kindness they quietly placed those maps into the hands of children who would someday guide others beneath the very same sky. How Section 8. The afternoon sun hangs comfortably above the valley, warming the earth without the fierce intensity of midsummer. Gentle clouds drift lazily across the sky, occasionally softening the light before moving on again. The scent of dry grass mixes with wildflowers blooming near the edge of the meadow, while bees wander patiently from blossom to blossom with quiet determination. The children have finished their morning tasks. Now they play. Or at least that is how it appears. A group of youngsters gathers in an open patch of soft earth near the camp. The oldest among them, perhaps 10 or 11 summers old, carefully pushes several small sticks into the ground, arranging them in a rough circle. The younger children watch with eager anticipation. Then the game begins. One child picks up a tiny spear no longer than an adult's forearm. It is carefully carved from a lightweight branch, its tip rounded smooth rather than sharpened. Standing only a few steps away, the child throws it toward the circle of sticks. The spear tumbles clumsily. It misses completely. Laughter fills the clearing. Not mocking laughter. Joyful laughter. The child laughs too. Failure feels safe here. That is important. You notice several adults watching from nearby without interrupting. One woman continues weaving a basket while quietly observing the game. A hunter repairing a spear glances up every few moments before returning to his work. An elder smiles without offering advice. Nobody takes control. The children do. Yet every adult remains close enough to step in should genuine danger appear. The arrangement feels wonderfully balanced. Freedom wrapped inside protection. Modern researchers studying children's development often emphasize the importance of play in building physical coordination, emotional resilience, creativity, and social understanding. Long before psychology existed, prehistoric communities likely discovered through experience that children learned remarkable skills while believing they were simply having fun. Play disguises practice. Practice shapes survival. You move closer as another round begins. This time the children increase the distance slightly. One little girl carefully adjusts her footing before throwing. Her miniature spear sails through the air in a graceful arc, knocking two sticks sideways. Her face lights up. The older children cheer. No prizes. No trophies. Only shared excitement. The hunter watching nearby quietly nods before returning to polishing his stone blade. That single nod may mean more than any reward. The breeze shifts, carrying the smell of fresh pine resin from recently cut branches stacked beside the camp. Somewhere overhead, ravens circle lazily, their deep calls echoing across the valley before fading into the distance. A new game begins almost immediately. Several children collect smooth stones from a nearby stream and arrange them in small piles. One child pretends the stones represent berries gathered during autumn. Another becomes the gatherer. A third carefully counts how many berries fit inside a tiny woven basket before it overflows. Nobody tells them to count. They simply do. Numbers emerge naturally. Many anthropologists believe counting and measuring likely developed through practical daily activities rather than formal lessons. Gathering food, dividing resources, tracking seasons, and sharing supplies all encouraged increasingly sophisticated ways of understanding quantity. Historians continue debating exactly how early numerical thinking evolved. Physical evidence remains scarce. Ideas leave few fossils. Still, children's games may have quietly strengthened mental abilities that later supported much more complex societies. A toddler wanders into the game carrying 3 unusually shaped acorns. Immediately, the rules change. The older children decide those acorns represent something rare, perhaps bird eggs, perhaps precious nuts saved for winter. The story shifts effortlessly. So does the learning. Imagination expands knowledge rather than replacing it. Nearby 2 boys challenge each other to balance along the trunk of a fallen tree. The log rises only a short distance above the ground, making the risk wonderfully small. The first boy crosses confidently. The second loses balance halfway. He jumps safely into the grass, then climbs back up smiling. Embarrassment. Just another attempt. Modern developmental scientists often refer to this kind of activity as risky play. The phrase sounds alarming, yet it describes carefully managed challenges where children test their abilities without facing overwhelming danger. Many researchers believe such experiences help develop judgment, confidence, and physical awareness. Others caution that evidence from deep prehistory remains indirect. Exactly how ancient families balanced freedom and protection is still actively discussed. The children themselves offer one possible answer. They keep trying. The warm afternoon continues unfolding peacefully. Butterflies dance across patches of purple flowers while dragonflies skim low over the nearby stream. The air carries faint traces of wood smoke drifting from cooking fires already being prepared for evening meals. A young mother sits beneath the shade of an oak tree, with the baby resting comfortably against her chest. Nearby, several older girls weave tiny baskets from long grasses gathered earlier that morning. Their baskets barely hold anything. That hardly matters. Tiny fingers slowly discover rhythm. Over. Under. Pull gently. Repeat. One basket collapses immediately. Its creator laughs. An older girl quietly helps straighten the weaving before handing it back. No one finishes the basket for her. They simply make success possible. Researchers studying traditional craft learning have observed that children often begin using miniature versions of adult tools and materials long before mastering them. These simplified tasks allow young learners to participate meaningfully while developing the coordination required for future responsibilities. Archaeologists suspect similar patterns existed throughout much of human prehistory. Miniature tools discovered at ancient sites continue fueling lively debate. Were they toys, practice equipment, ceremonial objects? Perhaps different examples serve different purposes. History rarely offers only one answer. The breeze cools slightly as soft clouds drift across the sun. Shadows stretch and contract over the valley floor, creating moving patches of light that fascinate several toddlers. One little boy begins chasing his own shadow. Soon others join him. Within moments, half the camp is laughing. Even the adults smile. Play requires very little, only curiosity. A sudden shout draws everyone's attention. Not alarm, excitement. A group of older children has built a pretend hunting trail, using scattered branches, feathers, and carefully arranged footprints pressed into damp soil. Younger children must follow the clues without stepping outside the invisible path. The challenge proves surprisingly difficult. Several wander off immediately. The older children patiently guide them back. One child discovers the final feather hidden beneath a fern. Cheers erupt. Nobody realizes they have been practicing tracking, except perhaps the adults. The smell of roasting roots grows stronger as evening approaches. Someone adds fresh herbs to a cooking pot, releasing warm aromas of wild garlic, thyme, and crushed leaves that mingle beautifully with smoke drifting through the camp. The games gradually become quieter. Children begin helping prepare the evening meal without being asked. The pretend baskets are set aside. Real baskets appear. The toy spears rest against a log. Adult spears are carried toward the fire. The transition feels seamless. Play becomes work. Work still feels playful. One more remarkable archaeological discovery comes from prehistoric footprints found alongside those of adults during hunting expeditions. Some researchers suggest older children accompanied experienced hunters gradually learning tracking skills through observation and participation. Others argue certain trackways may simply reflect travel rather than instruction. The evidence remains incomplete, yet one conclusion seems increasingly likely. Children were active participants in prehistoric life, not distant spectators. The sun slips lower toward the horizon, bathing the valley in warm amber light. Long shadows stretch across the meadow, while evening birds begin replacing the songs of daytime insects. The children gather one final time before supper. No game is announced. One simply begins. A little girl tosses the feather into the air. Another catches it. Soon everyone joins. The feather drifts gently from hand to hand, carried by laughter, careful movements, and endless imagination. Watching them, you begin to understand something quietly extraordinary. The future of humanity was never shaped only by successful hunts or clever inventions. It was shaped every afternoon when children learned courage without fear, cooperation without commands, patience without lectures, and skill without pressure. To an outside observer, they were merely playing. History was watching something much greater. It was watching the next generation quietly rehearse the lives they would someday lead, one joyful game at a time. Section 9. Morning arrives beneath a sky the colour of pale ash, with heavy clouds drifting low across the valley. The sunlight that finally reaches the ground feels gentle and muted, casting soft silver across the grasses instead of yesterday's warm gold. A cool wind whispers through the trees, carrying the earthy smell of damp leaves and the faint promise of approaching rain. The camp feels different today, quieter, not because anyone is afraid, because food has become scarce. The baskets that usually overflow with roots and berries now contain only modest handfuls. The hunters returned late yesterday, carrying far less than they had hoped. Even the nearby stream seems quieter, flowing steadily, without the lively chorus of birds that often gathers along its banks. No one complains, no one panics. Ancient people understood something modern life often allows us to forget. Nature has generous seasons. Nature also has lean ones. You watch as the morning meal is prepared with careful attention. A large stone bowl receives chopped roots, a few precious mushrooms scattered, nuts gathered weeks earlier, and the last pieces of dried meat hanging beneath the shelter. Nothing is wasted. Every fragment matters. The rich aroma of simmering herbs slowly fills the camp, blending with wood smoke rising gently into the cool morning air. The meal smells comforting despite its simplicity. Several children gather nearby. Their eyes follow every movement. The youngest among them rubs a sleepy face before wandering toward the cooking fire, curious as always. His mother smiles warmly. She strokes his hair, then quietly places the first portion into his small wooden bowl. Only after every child has received food do the adults begin serving themselves. You notice something immediately. The portions are uneven. The children receive slightly more. The adults accept slightly less. Nobody discusses the decision. Nobody needs to. For decades, anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have documented a remarkably consistent pattern. Across many communities, adults frequently prioritize feeding children during periods of limited resources because the survival of the youngest members directly shapes the future of the entire group. The exact balance undoubtedly varied from one prehistoric community to another. Historians remain cautious. Ancient families lived under vastly different conditions across continents and climates. Yet one principle appears again and again. Children mattered enormously. The little boy eagerly eats every bite before looking curiously toward his mother's bowl. She notices. Without hesitation, she breaks her remaining root into two smaller pieces. One piece quietly slides into his hands. The other stays with her. He grins. She says nothing. Perhaps she is still hungry. You suspect she is. The smell of warm food lingers in the cool air as the camp slowly comes alive. Older children begin gathering kindling while younger ones chase one another gently through patches of damp grass sparkling with morning dew. The adults work as they always do. Only you notice the subtle differences. One hunter tightens his belt slightly farther than usual. A woman quietly drinks more water before eating, helping calm the empty feeling in her stomach. An elder chooses only herbs for breakfast, leaving richer foods untouched. Small sacrifices, almost invisible. Together they become extraordinary. Researchers studying human evolution have often argued that food sharing represents one of our species' defining characteristics. Unlike many animals that consume resources immediately after finding them, humans frequently gather, transport, divide, and redistribute food among many individuals. Exactly why this behavior became so deeply rooted remains debated. Some scholars emphasize kinship, others point toward reciprocal cooperation. Still others believe shared childcare encouraged increasingly generous food distribution. Perhaps all contributed. Human history rarely grows from a single cause. The clouds darken slightly overhead. A soft drizzle begins. Tiny droplets patter gently across broad leaves before soaking into the thirsty earth below. Children stretch curious hands toward the falling rain, while adults quickly cover stored food with carefully stitched animal hides. The rain lasts only a few minutes. The fresh scent afterward is unforgettable. Wet soil, crushed grass, rain-washed bark. The valley seems newly alive. Several children help collect rainwater dripping from large leaves into hollowed wooden bowls. Their excitement turns an ordinary chore into another joyful adventure. Learning hides everywhere, even inside weather. One little girl proudly carries a bowl nearly full of water toward the camp. Halfway there, she stumbles. Most of the water spills onto the ground. She freezes. Her shoulders fall. For a brief moment, disappointment settles across her face. An older woman kneels beside her. Instead of expressing frustration, she gently tips the remaining water into another container. Then she points toward the fresh droplets still falling from nearby branches. The child smiles again. There is more water. There is another chance. Resilience often grows from moments exactly like these, not from perfection. Modern psychologists have found that supportive responses to mistakes encourage children to remain curious rather than fearful. Ancient caregivers almost certainly lacked formal theories, yet practical wisdom may have led them toward remarkably similar approaches. Children learn confidence. Adults protect confidence. Both matter. The rain passes, completely revealing patches of blue sky between drifting clouds. Steam begins rising softly from sun-warmed rocks while birds cautiously return to the branches overhead. Our hunting party prepares to leave. Today includes someone new, a teenage boy, not fully grown, not entirely inexperienced either. He carries a shorter spear than the adults carefully balance for his size. Before departing, his father quietly kneels beside the youngest children gathered near the fire and places a small pouch of dried berries into his daughter's hands. She looks puzzled. He smiles gently. The message requires no words. Keep these, just in case, and leaves carrying only his spear, not the berries. Such gestures rarely appear in archaeological records. Leather pouches decay. Dried fruit disappears. Gentle decisions leave no fossils. Yet they may have happened countless times. History often remembers weapons. It forgets lunches packed with love. Nearby, the baby begins crying. An older sister immediately lifts a carved wooden rattle decorated with smooth pebbles sealed inside a hollow shell. She shakes it gently. Soft rhythms fill the air. The baby quiets. Researchers have discovered ancient rattles and sound-making objects at several archaeological sites, although their exact purposes remain debated. Some may have served ritual roles, others may simply have entertained infants or soothed restless children. Perhaps they accomplished both. Ancient life rarely separated practicality from affection. As afternoon approaches, the hunters remain away while those staying behind continue gathering edible plants close to camp. Children accompany them, learning once again which leaves nourish, which berries sustain, and which plants remain untouched. The little boy from breakfast notices his mother moving more slowly than usual. Without being asked, he picks up several extra roots she has gathered. They are heavy. He carries them anyway. She notices. Her smile says everything. The lessons of generosity are no longer flowing in one direction. The child has begun teaching himself. One fascinating archaeological mystery involves periods of prehistoric climate change that dramatically reduced available food across entire regions. Researchers continue debating exactly how ancient communities survived these difficult years. Greater cooperation, long distance movement, expanded diets, innovative tools, likely all played important roles, yet cooperation may have been the most valuable resource of all. The afternoon gradually gives way to evening. Smoke rises once again from cooking fires as the hunting party finally returns. They have succeeded, not spectacularly. Enough. Enough for tonight. Relief spreads quietly through the camp, not as loud celebration, but as relaxed shoulders, easier smiles, and children happily gathering around the returning adults. The teenage hunter receives a respectful nod from the elder. No speech. No ceremony. Just recognition. Watching the evening meal unfold beneath the growing darkness, you realize something profound. For hundreds of thousands of years, countless parents probably surrendered the largest piece of meat, the warmest sleeping place, the safest position beside the fire, or the final handful of berries without ever expecting praise. Their names disappeared. Their sacrifices did not. Every child who survived carried those invisible gifts into another generation. And perhaps that quiet generosity, repeated millions of times across ancient landscapes, became one of the strongest foundations upon which humanity itself was built. Ham Section 10. The evening settles gently over the valley once again, wrapping the land in cool blue shadows that slowly replace the warmth of the fading day. The last rays of sunlight linger on distant cliffs before disappearing, completely, leaving the camp surrounded by the comforting glow of several carefully tended fires. The air feels different tonight, calmer. The rain from yesterday has washed the dust from every leaf, and the scent of damp earth still rises softly beneath the smell of cedar smoke and roasting roots. Somewhere beyond, the ring of light frogs begin calling from a nearby marsh. Their slow rhythm blends with the crackling fire until both sounds become almost impossible to separate. You notice something curious. The camp has grown unusually quiet, not silent, attentive. A toddler sits on a smooth stone, studying the face of his father with complete concentration. The man is not speaking. He simply watches a cooking pot balanced above glowing embers. The child watches too, every movement, every expression, every pause. Then something unexpected happens. The man glances toward the pot, wrinkles his nose dramatically, and pretends to make the most exaggerated face of disappointment. Disappointment imaginable. The toddler bursts into laughter. Several nearby adults cannot help smiling. No words were exchanged. Yet an entire conversation just happened. I begin to realize that long before children understood spoken language, they learned to read faces. Perhaps humanity's first classroom was not the forest, not the river, not even the fire. It was another human face. Modern developmental scientists have discovered that infants begin recognizing facial expressions astonishingly early in life. Long before they can speak, babies carefully observe smiles, raised eyebrows, widened eyes, and subtle changes around the mouth. These expressions gradually become maps for understanding comfort, danger, curiosity, approval, and concern. Ancient children almost certainly relied upon the same remarkable ability. Faces became guides, guides became trust, trust became survival. The little boy continues studying his father. This time the man points toward a cooking stone that still glows faintly red. He widens his eyes, raises one finger, then slowly shakes his head. The child immediately stops reaching. No lengthy explanation, only one shared expression. The lesson settles quietly into memory. Historians continue debating exactly how sophisticated spoken language had become among early populations hundreds of thousands of years ago. Fossils reveal almost nothing about conversations. Bone cannot preserve voices, grammar, or vocabulary. Yet communication extends far beyond speech. Gestures matter. Eye contact matters. Expressions matter. Perhaps they always have. You shift closer to the fire, feeling pleasant warmth spread across your hands while cool night air brushes gently against your shoulders. Sparks drift upward before disappearing into the enormous canopy of stars overhead. The baby has awakened. Instead of crying immediately, the infant quietly studies the faces gathered nearby. One older sister notices. She smiles. The baby smiles back. It lasts only a scan. Everyone nearby smiles too. The entire circle briefly glows brighter, not because the fire changed, because people did. Researchers often describe human smiling as deeply social. While some smiles appear naturally, many also strengthen emotional bonds, reassure frightened children, and encourage cooperation. Exactly how these expressions evolved remains actively discussed among scientists. Some emphasize caregiving, others point toward group cooperation. Perhaps evolution quietly favored both. Across the fire, an elderly woman carefully prepares strips of softened hide for sewing. Beside her sits a little girl, barely old enough to thread a tiny bone needle. The child struggles. The thread slips away repeatedly. Each attempt ends in gentle frustration. The elder never reaches over to finish the task herself. Instead, she smiles encouragingly, tilts her head slightly, nods. Try again. The little girl breathes deeply. Attempts once more. Success. Her grin arrives before the thread even reaches the other side. One approving nod, one delighted smile, another invisible lesson completed. Educational researchers today often note that facial encouragement significantly influences children's willingness to persist through difficult tasks. Ancient communities likely understood this naturally, not through written theory, but through generations of quiet observation. Confidence grows, one expression at a time. The breeze shifts, carrying the rich aroma of roasted mushrooms mixed with crushed mint leaves drying near the fire. Smoke curls lazily into the night sky while distant crickets begin their steady evening chorus. A group of older boys gathers near the edge of camp. One pretends to spot danger hidden among nearby bushes. Without speaking, he raises his hand sharply. Every other child freezes instantly. Then they all laugh. The signal worked. Games continue teaching, even now. You'll begin noticing how many important messages require almost no words at all. A quick glance towards approaching weather, a reassuring touch upon a frightened shoulder, a quiet nod before crossing a shallow stream, a raised hand warning children to remain still. Communication surrounds fills camp constantly. Much of it remains beautifully silent. One fascinating discovery from neuroscience suggests that humans possess specialized brain systems that help us understand the actions and intentions of others, simply by observing them. Although scientists continue debating the exact role of these mirror systems, many believe they contribute significantly to imitation, empathy, and social learning. The ancient people before you never heard such theories. They lived them every day. A soft cry suddenly echoes beyond the firelight. Not the baby, another child. Several adults immediately turn their heads. One mother rises. Before she reaches the source, an older brother, has already helped the younger child stand after tripping over a fallen branch. No serious injury, only surprise. The younger child's face crumples for an instant. Then the older brother smiles warmly. The tears disappear almost immediately. Sometimes reassurance arrives faster than pain. You walk slowly towards the edge of camp where the moonlight spills across the open meadow. The silver light transforms familiar grasses into gentle waves shimmering beneath the night sky. Fireflies blink quietly among low bushes, appearing and disappearing like tiny wandering stars. Several children have noticed them too. One little boy points excitedly. His grandfather kneels beside him. Neither speaks. They simply watch together. Some lessons require silence. Patience can be taught without words. Historians still argue about how much emotional life can be reconstructed from archaeological evidence. Stone tools reveal craftsmanship. Animal bones reveal hunting. Ancient hearths reveal gathering places. Expressions vanish forever. Smiles leave no fossils. Neither do comforting glances. Yet few scholars doubt that emotional communication played an essential role in raising unusually dependent human children. Without trust, cooperation weakens. Without cooperation, survival becomes far more difficult. The evening meal finishes slowly. Children curl beside parents, grandparents, older siblings, and trusted friends. The warmth of shared bodies mixes with the fading heat of the fire while soft conversations drift gently through the cool night air. One little girl begins yawning. Her mother notices immediately. No words, only open arms. The child settles comfortably against her chest. Eyes close. The steady rhythm of breathing soon matches the quiet crackling of the fire. Watching the peaceful scene unfold, you understand something both simple and profound. Ancient childhood was never guided only by instructions. It was shaped by countless expressions repeated every day. A smile encouraging another attempt. A serious look preventing danger. A patient nod rewarding courage. Gentle eyes welcoming a frightened child home. These silent conversations crossed generations long before anyone carved symbols into stone or inked words onto parchment. They carried love. They carried wisdom. Most importantly, they carried children safely through a world where understanding another human face could mean the difference between fear and confidence, isolation and belonging, or even life and death. And perhaps when you smile at someone today without saying a single word, you quietly continue a conversation that began around ancient fires hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our section 11, the first light of dawn, slips quietly over the eastern hills, turning the edges of the clouds into ribbons of pale gold. The night's coolness still lingers in the valley, and tiny beads of dew cling to every blade of grass. A gentle breeze carries the scent of damp earth mixed with wood smoke from fires that never completely died during the night. The camp stirs, not hurriedly, comfortably. You notice something has changed. The children who once spent nearly every waking moment observing now begin doing something different. They begin helping. No ceremony announces the moment. No elder declares that childhood has ended. Responsibility arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. A boy who only months ago followed hunters with endless questions now rises before sunrise to gather dry branches for the morning fire. His bundle is not large. An adult could carry 3 times as much without effort. That hardly matters. He carries what he can. The contribution is real. Nearby, the little girl who once practiced weaving tiny grass baskets now works beside her grandmother with fresh willow shoots. Her fingers still move more slowly than experienced hands, yet the pattern is unmistakably familiar. Over, under, pull gently. Repeat. She smiles each time another row holds together. The basket is beginning to resemble the ones used every day throughout the camp. Not perfect, useful. That is enough. You begin to understand that prehistoric childhood did not end on a particular birthday. There were no celebrations marking a specific age. No written records declared someone officially grown. Instead, adulthood approached like sunrise, gradually, almost invisibly. One morning, a child simply found themselves trusted with a task that yesterday belonged to someone older. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have often observed this gradual transition. Rather than separating work and childhood completely, many communities allow responsibilities to increase little by little, matching each child's growing abilities and confidence. Deep prehistory leaves no written confirmation. Historians continue debating how universal this pattern may have been. Different climates, different cultures, different challenges. Yet gradual learning appears remarkably practical. The smell of roasting roots begins drifting across the camp as breakfast preparations continue. Fresh herbs crackle gently upon heated stones, releasing warm fragrances of thyme, wild onion, and crushed sage into the crisp morning air. The younger children remain close to the fire. The older ones spread across the valley. One group heads toward the stream carrying woven baskets. Another follows an experienced woman gathering edible greens. Two boys accompany our hunter inspecting simple animal traps placed the previous afternoon. Nobody expects perfection, only attention. You quietly follow the group walking toward the stream. The water sparkles beneath the morning sun, flowing peacefully around smooth stones polished by countless seasons. Dragonflies skim low above the surface while tiny fish dart between patches of waving reeds. An older girl kneels beside the bank. She studies the current, then carefully places a woven fish basket into the shallows. A younger boy watches every movement. She says very little. Instead, she gently motions for him to try placing the second basket. His first attempt tilts sideways. The current immediately pushes it loose and looks disappointed. The older girl smiles softly. She adjusts one supporting stone, then gestures for him to try again. This time the basket holds. The water flows through perfectly. Tiny fish may wander inside later. No lecture, just practice. Modern educational theory often emphasizes the importance of scaffolding, where experienced individuals provide just enough support for learners to succeed independently. Ancient communities almost certainly developed similar methods naturally, because constant correction would have slowed learning, while complete independence invited unnecessary mistakes. Balance mattered, always. The children continue gathering smooth stones from the stream bed, not because anyone requested them. Experience has taught them these stones often prove useful around camp. Cooking, grinding, repairing hearths. Children begin recognizing needs before being asked. That realization quietly marks another step toward adulthood. The breeze carries cool moisture from the flowing water. You kneel beside the stream, letting icy currents slip gently across your fingertips. The sensation is refreshing after the growing warmth of the morning. A sudden splash draws your attention. One little boy has slipped while lifting a heavy stone. His trousers are boom-soaked. Water drips from every direction. He looks completely startled. Then everyone laughs, including him. The embarrassment disappears almost instantly. The stone remains where it belongs. The lesson remains too. Choose a smaller one next time. Nearby, the hunters examine fresh animal tracks pressed into damp mud. One teenager crouches beside them. Instead of immediately following, he quietly studies every print. The older hunter waits patiently. Several moments pass. Finally, the teenager points toward a broken branch farther ahead. The hunter nods with obvious approval. Good observation. No unnecessary praise, only honest recognition. That small nod carries enormous weight. Researchers studying apprenticeship across many traditional societies have found that acknowledgement from respected adults often motivates young learners more effectively than constant rewards. Ancient families likely understood the quiet power of earned approval through generations of lived experience. Respect grows slowly, like skill. Across the valley, several girls gather edible berries beneath the watchful eye of an experienced elder. One younger child eagerly reaches toward a branch hanging slightly beyond her height. She jumps, misses. An older girl gently bends the branch downward. The younger child picks the berries herself. No one hands them to her. Success still belongs to her own effort. These tiny moments happen everywhere, almost continuously. One child learns to carry water without it spilling. Another sharpens a digging stick. Someone discovers how tightly hides must be stretched before drying. Another remembers which herbs belong together. No single lesson changes a life. Thousands do. One intriguing archaeological clue comes from prehistoric sites, where stone tools of increasing sophistication appear side by side, suggesting individuals practiced and gradually improved over many years, rather than mastering complex techniques all at once. Some researchers interpret this as evidence of prolonged learning. Others remain more cautious. Ancient workshops reveal patterns, not personal stories. Still, gradual improvement seems unmistakable. By midday, sunlight floods the valley with warm golden light. Cicadas begin singing among tall grasses, while butterflies drift lazily across open meadows rich with blooming flowers. The camp feels wonderfully alive. The baby now crawls confidently beneath the careful watch of several older children. Only weeks ago, they needed constant reminders to stay nearby. Today they remember without prompting. One toddler wanders toward a pile of freshly shaped stone flakes. Before any adult notices, an older boy gently redirects the little explorer toward a collection of harmless pine cones waiting to become another afternoon game. The movement is effortless. Protecting others has become habit. Watching this quiet exchange, you realize something remarkable. The children who once depended entirely upon everyone around them have slowly become guardians themselves. Not complete guardians, not yet, but the transformation has begun. The afternoon continues with countless ordinary tasks. Water is carried, firewood stacked, animal hides stretched, nets repaired, food gathered. Children participate in nearly every activity according to their growing abilities. No one expects childhood to disappear. Play still fills the spaces between work. Laughter still echoes across the valley. Curiosity remains wonderfully alive. Yet responsibility now walks beside it, not replacing joy, strengthening it. As the sun slowly begins descending toward the western hills, everyone returns toward camp, carrying whatever the day has provided. The youngest children proudly display handfuls of mushrooms. Older youngsters carry heavier bundles of firewood. Teenagers help transport woven baskets overflowing with roots and berries. Adults carry the largest loads. Everyone contributes. Watching them gather around the evening fire once more, you understand that ancient communities rarely waited for children to become adults before trusting them. Trust came first. Responsibility followed. Confidence grew naturally. And somewhere within those countless ordinary days, young hearts quietly discovered one of humanity's oldest lessons. I become capable not in a single unforgettable moment, but through hundreds of small opportunities to help someone else. Each one seems almost insignificant. Together they shape an entire life. Section 12. The morning sun rises through a thin curtain of drifting mist, painting the valley in soft shades of gold and silver. Moisture clings to every leaf and tiny droplets sparkle along spiderwebs stretched between low bushes. The cool air smells of damp grass, cedar bark, and yesterday's fire, whose gentle smoke still lingers among the trees. The camp awakens with its familiar rhythm. Children yawn. Adults stretch tired muscles. Someone quietly feeds fresh branches into the fire. Someone else begins grinding dried seeds into coarse flour. Everything feels comfortably ordinary. Yet today your attention settles on something you have slowly begun to notice over the past several days. There are no fixed lines, no invisible walls dividing one person's duties from another's. The baby wakes. The first person to lift the child is not the mother. It is an older brother. He smiles sleepily as he carefully cradles the tiny bundle against his chest. His movements remain cautious, almost exaggerated, because he understands how fragile the infant still is. A moment later, the child's mother arrives carrying a woven basket. She gently kisses the baby's forehead. Then she continues preparing for the morning's gathering trip. Nobody seems surprised. Nobody questions the arrangement. It simply works. Modern people often imagine prehistoric families through familiar images of strict roles where men hunted while women cared exclusively for children. Reality, however, was almost certainly far more flexible than that simple picture suggests. Anthropologists increasingly argue that successful hunter-gatherer societies depended upon cooperation far more than rigid division. Responsibilities shifted. Circumstances changed. Communities adapted. You watch as a broad-shouldered hunter kneels beside two curious toddlers. Instead of preparing weapons, he patiently helps them shape little balls of damp clay gathered beside the stream. One child proudly creates something resembling a bird. The other produces what could be a very determined rabbit, or perhaps a strangely shaped stone. The hunter studies both with complete seriousness. Her nods. The children laugh. The lesson has nothing to do with hunting. It has everything to do with attention. Nearby, two women inspect spear shafts leaning against a fallen log. One carefully checks the straightness of each wooden shaft, while the other binds fresh sinew around polished stone points. Their hands move confidently. Skill belongs to experience, not gender. Archaeological evidence has gradually challenged many older assumptions about prehistoric labor. Discoveries from several regions suggest that women may have participated in hunting more often than once believed, while men undoubtedly contributed to childcare whenever circumstances required. Historians continue debating the extent of these patterns. Ancient societies varied enormously. No single model fits every community. The deeper researchers look, the more flexible the picture often becomes. The smell of roasting roots drifts gently through the camp as breakfast nears completion. Someone adds crushed wild garlic to the cooking pot, releasing a rich aroma that blends beautifully with fresh herbs drying beside the fire. Children wander naturally between different groups of adults. A little girl spends several minutes watching an elder polish bone needles. Soon afterward, she joins a hunter repairing a carrying frame. Later, she follows another woman collecting medicinal plants. Nobody redirects her. Every adult becomes a teacher. Every activity becomes a lesson. You begin noticing that children rarely seem concerned about who is teaching them. They care about what they are learning. One little boy watches an experienced woman examine animal tracks pressed into soft mud beside the stream. She points toward the narrow hoof prints of a deer before comparing them with the smaller prints left by a young fox. The boy studies both carefully. Later that same morning, he proudly explains the difference to another child. Knowledge travels quickly, especially when shared freely. Modern developmental researchers sometimes describe human learning as deeply networked. Children gather information from many different people rather than relying upon a single source. This broad social learning allows knowledge to spread rapidly throughout a community. Ancient camps may have functioned in much the same way. Historians still debate exactly how organized these teaching networks became. Written records do not exist. Only scattered clues remain. The breeze strengthens, slightly carrying the clean scent of river water across the valley. Tall grasses ripple like gentle waves beneath the growing warmth of the sun. A hawk circles high overhead before gliding silently toward distant hills. Near the center of camp, the baby begins fussing again. This time a teenage girl picks up the infant. She gently rocks back and forth while humming a slow, soothing melody. The tune has no words, at least none that you recognize. The baby's breathing gradually slows. Tiny fingers relax. Relax. Within moments, sleep returns. Researchers studying traditional societies have often observed that older siblings frequently play meaningful roles in childcare. Exactly how common this pattern was in deep prehistory remains uncertain, but many anthropologists believe it likely offered tremendous advantages by allowing adults to divide demanding daily tasks more effectively. Growing up meant helping. Helping meant belonging. The camp itself encouraged both. You follow several adults heading toward the nearby forest to gather edible plants. Children accompany them in small groups, scattering occasionally to investigate feathers, unusual stones, or curious insects before naturally drifting back together. One young girl discovers a patch of bright flowers. She reaches eagerly toward them. Before she can pick the blossoms, an elderly man quietly kneels beside her and smells one flower, then gently shakes his head. Instead, he guides her toward another nearby plant with similar leaves but tiny white blossoms. She smells those too. Her face brightens. The elder smiles. No long explanation follows. The lesson settles gently into memory. One of the most fascinating aspects of prehistoric education may have been its remarkable efficiency. Knowledge rarely arrived through formal lessons separated from everyday life. Instead, every walk became a classroom. Every meal became instruction. Every gathering trip quietly expanded a child's understanding of the surrounding world. Learning never stopped. Neither did living. The afternoon grows pleasantly warm. Cicadas begin singing from patches of tall grass while butterflies drift between clusters of blooming lavender-colored flowers. Back at camp, you notice something unexpected. The broad-shouldered hunter who played with clay figures earlier now carefully repairs a torn baby's sling using a polished bone needle. His large hands move surprisingly gently. Across from him, the same woman whose sharpened spear points now demonstrates how to straighten a young sapling into a future digging stick. Nobody appears to find this unusual. Perhaps because it isn't. Responsibility follows ability, not expectation. One intriguing archaeological discovery comes from prehistoric graves containing tools once assumed to belong exclusively to one gender. Advances in scientific analysis have challenged several of those assumptions, revealing a far more complex picture of ancient lives than earlier generations imagined. Researchers continue reassessing many long-held ideas. The past remains wonderfully capable of surprising us. As afternoon slowly fades toward evening, children begin returning from their explorations carrying little treasures gathered throughout the day. A smooth shell from the stream, a feather marked with delicate stripes, an unusually shaped stone, a twisted branch resembling a tiny animal. Adults examine each discovery with genuine interest. Curiosity deserves encouragement, not dismissal. The baby awakens one final time before sunset. This time the entire circle seems ready. One adult warms food, another adjusts sleeping hides. An older child gently shakes the familiar rattle. Someone else quietly feeds another branch into the fire. No single person performs every task. Together everyone does. The evening sky glows with soft shades of amber before slowly deepening into violet. Smoke rises peacefully through the cooling air while the comforting smell of supper spreads across the camp. Watching these quiet moments unfold, you realize that humanity's earliest families were probably never built upon perfect roles performed by perfect people. They were built upon flexibility, upon trust, upon countless ordinary acts of cooperation that allowed each person to help wherever help was needed most. And perhaps that quiet willingness to share responsibility became one of the greatest gifts ancient parents ever passed to their children. Not simply teaching them how to survive, teaching them the no, one truly survives alone. Section 13. The sun slips slowly beneath the western hills, leaving behind a sky brushed with soft shades of amber, rose, and deepening violet. The valley exhales the warmth of the day, replacing it with a cool evening breeze that carries the comforting scent of cedar smoke, damp earth, and the last wildflowers still blooming beside the stream. Another day is ending. The children know the rhythm. Without being called, they drift toward the fire. Some carry small bundles of kindling gathered during the afternoon. Others proudly deliver handfuls of edible roots or fresh herbs. The youngest arrive with little more than smooth stones or colourful feathers discovered during their adventures. Every offering is welcomed. Every child belongs. The fire slowly brightens as another log settles into glowing embers. Warm orange light and dances across familiar faces while darkness gathers patiently beyond the edge of camp. Crickets begin their evening chorus. Somewhere farther away, an owl calls into the quiet forest. The baby sleeps peacefully. Older children settle close beside parents, grandparents, older siblings, and trusted friends. Nobody rushes. Night belongs to stories. You have noticed this before, yet tonight feels different. The elder who usually speaks first remains unusually quiet. Instead, he gestures toward a middle-aged woman seated across the fire. Deep laugh lines surround her eyes, and faint scars decorate the backs of her hands from countless years of gathering roots, preparing hides, and tending fires. She smiles gently, then begins. Her voice rises softly above the crackling flames. You cannot understand every ancient word, yet her gestures make the story beautifully clear. She points toward the stars, then toward the mountains, finally toward the youngest children listening with complete attention. The story belongs to them. Modern people often think of storytelling as entertainment. Ancient communities almost certainly expected much more. Stories preserved landscapes, remembered dangerous places, explained seasonal changes, celebrated cooperation, and quietly warned children about mistakes too costly to experience firsthand. A tale could save a life without sounding like a lesson. Anthropologists studying oral cultures have repeatedly found that narratives often contain practical information carefully woven into memorable characters and emotional moments. Children remember stories more easily than lists of instructions. Memory follows emotion. Always has. The woman reaches toward the fire and picks up a smooth piece of charcoal. She gently draws a winding line across a flat stone lying beside her. A river. Next she adds several tiny marks. Trees. Then a larger shape. A hill. Several children lean closer. She points toward one side of the drawing and slowly shakes her head. The younger ones immediately understand. Do not cross there. Perhaps the current runs too fast. Perhaps dangerous animals gather nearby. Perhaps someone long ago disappeared at that very place. The exact reason matters less than the lesson itself. Stories transform geography into memory. You breathe deeply as fragrant smoke curls lazily upward into the cool night air. The scent of roasted hazelnuts mixes with fresh mint leaves drying beside the fire, creating an aroma that feels strangely comforting despite belonging to a world unimaginably distant from your own. The youngest children begin asking questions. Not many, just enough. One little boy points excitedly toward a bright star appearing above the eastern ridge. The storyteller pauses. She smiles, then gently reshapes the story around his curiosity. The star becomes part of the journey. The children listen even more carefully. Researchers studying oral traditions have long observed that storytelling often remains surprisingly flexible. Core lessons survive across generations, while smaller details shift naturally to fit changing audiences, seasons, or local events. Historians still debate exactly how stable prehistoric stories remained over centuries. No recordings exist. No written copies survive. Only echoes remain. Yet those echoes have travelled remarkably far. Across the fire, an older brother quietly gathers three younger children closer beneath a shared animal hide as the evening breeze grows cooler. He does not interrupt the story. He simply notices. Care often arrives silently. The storyteller now imitates the movements of several animals. A cautious deer, a patient wolf, a curious raven. Each movement draws delighted smiles from the children. Then her expression suddenly changes. She freezes, completely still. Every child instinctively becomes still as well. Several heartbeats pass. Only the fire continues moving. Then she laughs softly. The children laugh. Laugh with her. Without realizing it, they have just practiced remaining perfectly quiet. A useful skill, hidden inside play. Educational researchers today recognize that stories can strengthen attention, empathy, memory, and emotional understanding simultaneously. Ancient families likely discovered these benefits through simple experience rather than formal observation. Children who listened carefully remembered more. Children who remembered more often survived longer. Nearby, the elder, who remained silent earlier, watches everything with quiet satisfaction. He occasionally nods, adding only a brief sentence or a familiar gesture when the storyteller pauses. Knowledge belongs to everyone, not one voice. The fire crackles loudly as another branch settles into glowing coals. Tiny sparks rise toward the stars before disappearing into the immense darkness above. You tilt your head upward. The sky feels endless. The children see stories there too. Long before telescopes or astronomy, people around the world connected stars with their memory, direction, animals, ancestors, and seasonal change. Although scholars continue debating how much prehistoric people understood about the night sky, archaeological evidence strongly suggests careful observation stretched back tens of thousands of years. The heavens became another teacher, patient, reliable, always returning. A little girl yawns. She tries to hide it. The storyteller notices immediately. Rather than ending the tale, she quietly slows her voice. The rhythm changes. Sentences become gentler. Longer pauses appear between thoughts. One by one, several toddlers lean comfortably against nearby adults. The story welcomes it. Perhaps bedtime stories have always served two purposes: to preserve knowledge and to bring peace. One fascinating archaeological mystery involves engraved stones, carved bones, and painted cave walls whose exact meanings remain uncertain. Some researchers believe certain images may have supported storytelling traditions. Others argue they held ritual significance or marked important places. Perhaps they accomplished many things at once. Human creativity rarely chooses only one purpose. The evening grows cooler. Someone quietly places another hide over the sleeping baby while another adult gently adjusts the fire to produce steady warmth through the coming night. Nobody interrupts the storyteller. Even practical work flows around her voice. Children continue drifting towards sleep, yet their faces remain peaceful. The stories have replaced the day's excitement with quiet certainty. They belong here. They understand this place. They are surrounded by people who remember. The final part of the tale arrives almost as a whisper. The storyteller points first toward the oldest elder, then toward the oldest children, finally toward the youngest baby sleeping peacefully nearby. No words are needed. The message crosses every generation gathered around the fire. One day you will remember. One day you will tell. One day another child will listen. The fire burns lower, now glowing more red than gold. The scent of warm ash mixes gently with cooling night air. Crickets continue their endless song while the owl calls once again from the distant forest. Watching the children slowly fall asleep beneath ancient stars, you begin to understand that humanity's earliest libraries never stood upon shelves. They lived inside patient voices, inside careful listeners, inside stories repeated so lovingly that they survived thousands of winters without ever being written down. Each tale carried more than entertainment. It carried rivers, mountains, animals, warnings, hope, and perhaps most importantly, the quiet assurance that every generation could borrow the wisdom of those who came before. Long before books existed, children closed their eyes beside warm fires and dreamed inside stories. Those dreams helped shape the future of our species. How? Section 14. Morning arrives wrapped in the gentle fragrance of wet grass and blooming flowers. During the night, a light mist settled across the valley, leaving every leaf covered in tiny droplets that sparkle like scattered beads beneath the rising sun. The air feels cool against your skin, carrying the fresh scent of pine-damp soil and distant river water flowing quietly through smooth stones. The children wake before the adults finish preparing breakfast, not because they are restless, because they are excited. Something has changed. Spring has arrived. Only a few weeks ago, the valley looked completely different. Bare branches stretched across grey skies. Cold winds swept through open ground, and every meal demanded careful planning. Now everything feels alive. Young shoots push through the earth. Birdsong fills the morning air. Tiny insects dance above fresh green grasses. The children notice every detail. They always do. A little girl kneels beside a cluster of delicate white flowers that seemed invisible yesterday. She reaches toward one blossom, then pauses. She remembers. Some flowers may be safe, some may not. Instead of picking it immediately, she looks toward her grandmother, gathering herbs nearby. The elder smiles. She nods once. Only then does the little girl carefully collect the flower. One gentle glance. One silent lesson remembered across the changing season. You begin to understand that ancient childhood followed a calendar unlike any modern one. There were no printed months, no classroom terms, no scheduled holidays. The seasons themselves became teachers. Every change in weather introduced new lessons. Spring invited gathering. Summer encouraged exploration. Autumn demanded preparation. Winter rewarded memory. Each season quietly shaped another piece of a child's understanding. The camp slowly fills with the comforting smell of roasted roots, mixed with fresh herbs gathered only hours earlier. Young nettles simmer gently inside a stone cooking pot, while crushed wild onions release a rich aroma that drifts through the cool morning air. Several children eagerly volunteer to accompany the gathering groups. Nobody hesitates. They have waited all winter for this. The valley beyond this camp has transformed. Fresh green leaves cover shrubs that once stood bare. Bright yellow flowers blanket open meadows. Bees hum steadily among blossoms, while butterflies drift lazily through patches of sunlight. The youngest children run ahead. Not far, just enough. Older siblings naturally keep pace behind them. Protection continues, even in abundance. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have long noted that seasonal knowledge often forms the foundation of survival. Knowing exactly when certain plants emerge, where animals migrate, or how weather patterns shift can determine whether a community thrives or struggles. Historians believe prehistoric children gradually absorbed this calendar through repeated experience, not by memorizing dates, by living them. The little boy who once stumbled over hidden roots now confidently walks through the forest, carefully pointing toward edible shoots emerging beside fallen logs. His younger sister follows closely. She copies him. Months ago, someone guided him. Now he guides someone else. Knowledge continues flowing, like the nearby stream. You kneel beside a patch of soft moss warmed by early sunlight. It feels cool and wonderfully springy beneath your fingertips. Tiny ferns uncurl slowly from the forest floor while birds call cheerfully from every direction. The world seems generous again, yet the adults remain attentive. One experienced woman pauses beside a berry bush covered with tiny green fruit. The children immediately gather around. They remember these bushes. Last autumn they overflowed with sweet berries. Hands reach eagerly toward the branches. The woman gently shakes her head. Not yet. Patience becomes another seasonal lesson. Children quickly learn that nature keeps its own schedule. Rushing rarely improves it. Researchers studying ecological knowledge often describe traditional societies as possessing extraordinarily detailed understanding of seasonal cycles. Such knowledge frequently includes flowering times, animal behavior, water availability, and subtle environmental changes that outsiders easily overlook. Exactly how early prehistoric children mastered these patterns remains uncertain. The process likely differed across climates and cultures. Still, observation undoubtedly played a central role. The forest itself became a patient teacher. By midday, the warmth of spring spreads comfortably across the valley. The cool morning mist has vanished, replaced by gentle sunshine filtering through newly opened leaves. Children scatter across a wide meadow collecting edible greens. One girl discovers a bird's nest carefully hidden beneath low branches. She gasps quietly. Everyone nearby turns. The older woman kneels beside her. Neither touches the nest. Instead, they simply watch. Tiny chicks stretch featherless necks toward the sky. Hungry, hopeful, the children smile. The woman quietly leads them away. Some treasures belong to themselves. Respect becomes another lesson. The afternoon drifts peacefully onward. Dragonflies skim across the stream while frogs hide among thick reeds. The smell of warm earth rises beneath the growing sunshine, carrying hints of wild mint crushed beneath small feet. Several boys begin building tiny shelters from fallen branches, not because they need them, because winter taught them how. Play remembers difficult seasons, even when hardship has passed. Modern psychologists have observed that children often reenact important experiences through imaginative play. Ancient youngsters likely did the same, transforming memories of storms, hunting trips, shelter building, and seasonal challenges into games that quietly reinforced valuable skills. Learning continues, even during laughter. One fascinating archaeological mystery comes from ancient pollen preserved beneath prehistoric campsites. By studying microscopic grains trapped inside layers of soil, researchers can reconstruct changing seasons and surrounding vegetation, offering remarkable glimpses into landscapes where children once explored. The evidence remains incomplete. Nature rarely preserves every detail, yet tiny grains of pollen quietly remember what people could not write. As the sun slowly begins descending towards the western hills, the gathering groups return toward camp, carrying baskets overflowing with fresh greens, herbs, mushrooms, and edible shoots. The mood feels lighter than it has for many days. Children chatter excitedly. Adults smile more easily. The valley has become generous once again. Back at camp, the baby sits supported by soft hides, watching older children proudly display their discoveries. One child carries an unusually shaped feather. Another has found a beautifully polished stone. A little girl carefully presents the single white flower she gathered that morning. Her grandmother accepts it with genuine delight, not because the flower is valuable, because the lesson is. She waited, she remembered, she understood. As evening settles across the valley, warm amber light washes gently over familiar faces gathered around the fire. The comforting scent of fresh herbs cooking beside roasted roots fills the cool air while birds gradually surrender the sky to the first evening stars. Watching the children share today's discoveries, you realize something quietly extraordinary. Ancient people did not simply teach children to survive every season. They taught children to notice every season: the first blossom, the returning birds, the swelling river, the ripening berries, the cooling winds, the falling leaves. Each change became part of an invisible calendar carried not inside books but inside attentive minds. And year after year, as the seasons circled endlessly across the valley, those patient observations slowly transformed curious children into adults who could read the living world as easily as others might someday read words upon a page. Has Section 15. The morning begins with an unusual stillness. Even the birds seem quieter today. A light fog rests gently across the valley, softening every tree and turning the distant hills into pale grey silhouettes. The air feels cool and heavy, carrying the scent of wet moss cedar bark and the faint sweetness of flowers that open during the night. Something feels different, not alarming, simply quieter. As you walk toward the center of the camp, you notice why. The little boy who spent yesterday collecting spring shoots remains curled beneath several warm animal hides. His cheeks are flushed, his eyes stay half closed even after the morning fire has been fed fresh wood. He is unwell. The camp continues working, but more gently. No one behaves as though illness is unusual. No one behaves as though it should be ignored. Instead, life quietly bends around the child. His mother kneels beside him, pressing the back of her hand gently against his forehead before offering a small drink of cool water gathered earlier from the stream. Nearby, his grandmother slowly crushes fragrant leaves between two smooth stones until they become a soft green paste. The scent drifts through the cool air. Mint, pine, something slightly bitter. The grandmother smiles reassuringly. Whether the mixture truly eases the illness or simply offers comfort, the child relaxes as she gently rubs a little onto his wrists and neck. Care begins with touch. Often before medicine, you settle quietly nearby, careful not to disturb the peaceful rhythm surrounding the little boy. The fire crackles softly while smoke rises in thin blue ribbons through the morning mist. Someone adds dried juniper branches to the flames, releasing a rich aroma that fills the camp with warm, resinous fragrance. The baby watches silently. Even the youngest seem to sense the quieter mood. Illness has accompanied humanity for as long as humanity has existed. Long before written medicine, hospitals or physicians' families depended upon observation, experience, and patient caregiving. Every generation inherited fragments of practical knowledge gathered through countless trials across thousands of seasons. Some remedies probably worked, others almost certainly did not. Distinguishing between them remains remarkably difficult. Historians and archaeologists continue debating exactly how extensive prehistoric medical knowledge became. Organic materials rarely survive, and many healing practices leave little physical evidence behind. Bones remember broken limbs. They rarely remember gentle hands. The grandmother finishes preparing the herbal mixture before quietly sitting beside the child. She begins humming a slow melody with no obvious words, her voice rising and falling, almost like the breeze moving through nearby trees. The little boy listens. His breathing gradually becomes calmer. Perhaps the song eases discomfort. Perhaps its greatest power lies elsewhere. Reassurance can heal in its own quiet way. Modern medical research increasingly recognizes that emotional comfort often influences recovery. Feeling protected can reduce stress, encourage rest, and strengthen resilience, even when it cannot directly cure disease. Ancient families understood none of the biology. They understood the child. That was enough to begin. The fog slowly lifts as the sun climbs higher into the morning sky. Fresh warmth spreads across the valley while tiny droplets disappear from leaves one by one. Bees return to flowering shrubs, and somewhere beyond the stream a woodpecker resumes its steady tapping. Life continues. So does care. Several older children quietly modify their games without anyone asking. Instead of shouting excitedly near the sleeping child, they move farther toward the meadow where laughter will not disturb his rest. One little girl notices the change immediately. She gently reminds a younger toddler to whisper. The toddler nods. No adult intervenes. compassion spreads naturally. Researchers studying child development often observe that empathy grows most effectively when children repeatedly witness caring behavior rather than simply hearing instructions about kindness. Ancient communities almost certainly taught compassion in much the same way. Children watched, children remembered, eventually children copied. The little boy stirs. His mother offers another sip of water. This time he drinks a little more. The grandmother smiles softly. A tiny improvement. Sometimes hope arrives in very small steps. You notice several bundles of dried plants hanging beneath the shelter, carefully protected from rain and morning moisture. Different leaves, roots, bark, and flowers have been gathered during previous seasons, each tied separately with plant fibers. Exactly which plants they contain remains impossible to know. Many prehistoric remedies have vanished completely from history. Others survive in traditional medicine practiced by communities around the world today. Connection against certainty often does not. Historians remain cautious when tracing ancient herbal knowledge across immense spans of time. Cultures changed. Plants differed between regions. Ideas evolved. Yet humanity's search for healing never truly stopped. The smell of simmering broth slowly replaces the stronger aromas of breakfast. Someone prepares a simple meal from roots, herbs, and small pieces of dried meat, allowing the rich scent to drift gently through the camp. The child awakens again and does not ask for much. Only the warm broth. His mother blows carefully across the wooden bowl before offering tiny spoonfuls, one at a time. Patience fills every movement. Nearby, an elder examines several smooth stones warmed beside the fire. He wraps them inside soft animal hide before placing the bundle gently near the child's feet. Warmth, comfort, perhaps healing, perhaps simply kindness. Modern archaeologists occasionally discover evidence suggesting prehistoric people cared for seriously injured or chronically ill individuals over extended periods. Skeletons bearing healed fractures or conditions requiring long-term assistance strongly suggest that survival often depended upon ongoing support from others. Exactly how such care was organized remains uncertain. Communities surely differed. Still, the evidence reveals something profoundly human. People stayed. They helped. The afternoon grows pleasantly warm. Sunlight filters through newly opened spring leaves, painting shifting patterns across the ground. Butterflies drift between flowers while dragonflies shimmer above the stream. The little boy finally sits upright, only briefly. The children notice immediately. One older brother quietly brings him a smooth stone collected earlier that morning, not because the stone possesses magical powers, because it is beautiful. The sick child smiles. The gift costs almost nothing. Its value cannot be measured. Another fascinating mystery comes from prehistoric burials where individuals were interred with flowers, pigments, or carefully arranged objects. Scholars continue debating whether these discoveries reflect symbolic beliefs, practical customs, or something more complex. The same uncertainty surrounds healing rituals. Did songs possess spiritual meaning? Did herbs carry symbolic importance beyond physical effects? Did comforting touch itself become sacred? History offers possibilities, rarely certainty. As the afternoon slowly gives way to evening, the little boy manages to stand with gentle support from his mother. His legs remain weak, yet they hold. The entire camp notices. Nobody applauds. Nobody celebrates loudly. The grandmother simply nods. The older children smile. The baby laughs unexpectedly. Quiet happiness spreads through the camp like sunlight returning after clouds. Dinner begins beneath another peaceful sunset. Fresh herbs flavor the evening meal while smoke rises gently into the cooling sky. The valley feels familiar once again, not because illness has vanished, because care never did. Watching the families gathered around the fire, you realize that prehistoric medicine was never limited to plants, poultices, or carefully remembered remedies. It also lived inside of patient voices, steady hands, shared meals, warm blankets, gentle songs, hope carried from one sunrise to the next. Long before anyone understood bacteria, viruses, or anatomy, ancient people already understood something equally important. No one heals completely alone, and perhaps that simple truth became one of humanity's oldest and most enduring medicines. Ham Section 60. Dawn arrives beneath the sky swept clean by the night's gentle winds. The stars have only just faded when the first pale light begins spreading across the eastern horizon, painting the valley in quiet shades of silver and soft blue. The air feels crisp and refreshing, carrying the scent of wet stone, fresh pine, and smoke drifting lazily from embers that patiently survived another night. The camp wakes before sunrise. Today feels different. The children sense it immediately, not because anyone announces it, because the older boys and girls are preparing for something they have anticipated for many seasons. Today, they will be trusted with greater challenges. not impossible ones, just larger than yesterday's. You notice a young girl tightening the straps of her small carrying basket with unusual care. Beside her, a teenage boy quietly checks the balance of a newly carved spear. Neither appears frightened. They appear thoughtful. Responsibility has a way of doing that. The youngest children watch with wide eyes. Only months ago, these older companions spent their afternoons inventing games beside the stream. Now they prepare to venture farther into the surrounding forest than ever before. Childhood has not ended. It is simply growing. You quietly follow the group as they leave the camp shortly after sunrise. An experienced hunter walks at the front while an elderly woman familiar with every path and seasonal plant remains near the back. No one walks alone. No one needs to. The morning forest welcomes you with gentle birdsong, echoing through tall birch and pine. Sunlight filters softly through fresh spring leaves, creating moving patches of gold across the moss-covered ground. The smell of damp bark and rich earth fills every breath. The teenagers move confidently, not perfectly. One young boy notices fresh hoofprints crossing the trail. He immediately points them out. The hunter kneels. He studies the tracks carefully. Then he smiles. Good observation. The compliment is brief. It means everything. Modern researchers studying apprenticeship often describe learning as a gradual expansion of responsibility. Rather than suddenly expecting mastery, experienced adults increase challenges step by step, allowing confidence and judgment to grow together. Deep prehistory almost certainly followed no universal formula. Historians continue debating how different communities mark the transition toward adulthood. Some groups may have celebrated with ceremonies. Others perhaps relied upon quieter changes like the one unfolding before you. Trust itself became the milestone. The trail narrows as it climbs a gentle hillside overlooking the valley below. From here you can see smoke rising peacefully from the camp, while children too young for today's journey continue playing safely beside the familiar fires. The distance feels significant, not overwhelming. Exactly right. The hunter suddenly stops. He kneels beside a fallen tree where several edible mushrooms grow beneath damp bark. Instead of gathering them himself, he quietly gestures toward one of the teenagers. The young girl studies the mushrooms carefully. She remembers. Some resemble poisonous varieties. She examines the stems, the underside, the smell. Only after several thoughtful moments does she gently harvest the correct ones. The hunter nods once. No words. Her careful patience earned the answer. Educational psychologists today often note that confidence grows strongest when success follows genuine effort rather than immediate instruction. Ancient communities likely discovered the same truth through experience. Children become capable. Capability becomes courage. Courage remains careful. That last part matters most. The breeze strengthens slightly as clouds drift lazily across the morning sky. You hear woodpeckers tapping in the distance while squirrels leap effortlessly between branches overhead. The group continues deeper into the forest. Soon they reach a narrow stream crossing. The water flows swiftly after recent spring rains, sparkling brilliantly beneath shafts of sunlight. Several stepping stones emerge just above the current. The hunter crosses first. Not quickly, deliberately. One teenager follows. She pauses halfway. The final stone wobbles slightly beneath her foot. She steadies herself, continues, then reaches the opposite bank safely. The younger boy hesitates. The water suddenly looks much faster than before. The hunter notices. Instead of carrying him across, he simply extends one hand. The boy steps carefully. One stone, then another. Soon he reaches dry ground. The hunter releases his hand immediately. The crossing belonged to the boy, not the adult. Researchers studying resilience often distinguish between removing every difficulty and providing enough support to overcome difficulty. Ancient families almost certainly practiced this balance because survival required both confidence and caution. Too much protection delayed learning. Too little invited tragedy. Wisdom lived somewhere between. The forest opens into a sunny meadow alive with wild flowers. Bees drift peacefully from blossom to blossom while butterflies dance effortlessly through warm afternoon air. The elder kneels beside several unusual plants growing close together. She invites the teenagers closer. One leaf smells sweet, another smells bitter. A third has no scent at all. Each carries different meaning. One may flavor food, another may soothe an upset stomach. The last should remain untouched. The young learners smell each one carefully. Memory grows through every sense, not sight alone. One fascinating archaeological clue comes from microscopic plant residues preserved on ancient stone tools. These discoveries suggest prehistoric communities gathered and processed a surprising variety of plants reflecting ecological knowledge far richer than once imagined. Exactly who taught this knowledge remains uncertain. Parents, grandparents, experienced gatherers likely all contributed. Knowledge rarely belonged to only one teacher. By midday, the sun warms the forest pleasantly. The group pauses beneath a broad oak to share roasted roots, dried berries, and cool water carried from the stream. Conversation remains gentle. Occasionally, someone laughs. Mostly they observe. The hunter suddenly asks the teenagers to describe everything they have noticed since leaving camp. At first, they hesitate. Then the answers begin. Fresh deer tracks, blooming herbs, a broken bird's nest. Clouds moving from the west, the stronger current, mushrooms beneath damp bark. The hunter smiles. They have seen more than they realized. Observation improves when remembered aloud. Modern cognitive scientists often describe reflection as strengthening memory by organizing experience into meaningful patterns. Ancient people may never have framed it that way, yet asking thoughtful questions likely served much the same purpose. Experience becomes wisdom. Only after reflection, the journey home feels different, not because the forest has changed, because the teenagers have. Their steps appear steadier, their conversations quieter, their attention sharper. As they approach the camp, the younger children run eagerly to greet them. The returning teenagers proudly display gathered herbs, edible mushrooms, and several beautifully straight branches suitable for future spear shafts. No grand ceremony awaits. None is necessary. The adults notice. That is enough. One little boy looks up at the teenage hunter with unmistakable admiration. Not long ago, he watched this older boy learning exactly the same lessons. One day, he will walk the same trail. The circle continues. As evening settles across the valley, familiar aromas of roasting food, fresh herbs and tiered cedar smoke once again surround the camp. Children gather beside the fire while the newest generation of capable young people quietly joins the adults, preparing tomorrow's work. Watching the peaceful scene unfold beneath the first evening stars, you realize that courage was never taught by demanding fearlessness. It was taught one manageable challenge after another, one careful crossing, one patient observation, one earned success, again and again, until children no longer borrowed confidence from the adults beside them. They quietly discovered it within themselves, and that quiet confidence, carefully nurtured rather than hurried, became another priceless gift passed from one generation to the next across hundreds of thousands of years. Hammer Section 17. The valley greets the new day beneath a wide, cloudless sky. The first rays of sunlight spill gently across the grasslands, turning countless drops of morning dew into tiny flashes of gold. A cool breeze moves through the tall reeds beside the stream, carrying the clean scent of fresh water, flowering herbs, and the lingering smoke of fires that warmed the camp through another peaceful night. The morning feels familiar, yet something invisible has changed. You notice it in the way the older children move. Or perhaps they are no longer children. The teenage girl who once followed experienced gatherers now leaves camp carrying her own woven basket without waiting for instructions. The young hunter who only recently crossed the stream with a guiding hand now checks the condition of several spears before anyone asks. No announcement marks this moment. No elder declares their childhood complete. Life simply keeps moving. One ordinary day becomes another, then another. Somewhere within those countless mornings, dependence quietly transforms into responsibility. The change is almost impossible to see, unless you have watched it happen. You have. The baby who slept beside the fire has become a curious toddler. The toddler who chased butterflies now gathers edible roots. The child who once practiced with rounded toy spears now carries a carefully crafted hunting spear balanced confidently across broadening shoulders. Growth rarely arrives dramatically. It accumulates. Like seasons, the camp prepares for another journey beyond the valley. This time, however, something feels different. The experienced hunter remains behind to repair several damaged tools, while two young adults organize the gathering expedition themselves. Nobody appears concerned. The trust has already been earned. You quietly follow the group as they walk toward familiar forest paths. Sunlight filters through young spring leaves, creating shifting patterns across soft moss and weathered stones. Birds sing enthusiastically from hidden branches while squirrels dart playfully overhead. The path itself has not changed. The travelers have. One younger child wanders toward an unfamiliar cluster of plants growing beneath a fallen oak. Before any elder notices, the young woman gently places a hand upon the child's shoulder. She smiles, then points toward a safer patch nearby. Exactly the same gesture. You have seen it before. Months earlier, someone used that same quiet movement to guide her, but now she passes it forward, without thinking, without hesitation. That is how traditions survive, not through commands, through repetition. Anthropologists often describe cultural transmission as the process by which knowledge passes from one generation to another. unlike instinct alone, human traditions require continuous teaching, observation, imitation, and refinement. Every generation becomes both student and teacher, often at the same time. Historians still debate how rapidly cultural knowledge changed among prehistoric communities. Some innovations may have spread surprisingly quickly, others perhaps remained unchanged for thousands of years. The archaeological record reveals remarkable continuity alongside gradual change. Humanity learned patiently. The breeze carries the rich scent of damp pine needles as the group enters a clearing filled with blooming wildflowers. Bees hum peacefully between blossoms, while dragonflies shimmer above a nearby pond, reflecting the bright blue sky. The younger children immediately scatter with excitement, not recklessly, confidently. They know the boundaries now. One little boy kneels beside a patch of mushrooms and pauses, looks toward the young woman. She nods once. He smiles proudly. He remembered. Researchers studying memory have found that successful recall becomes increasingly reliable when knowledge has been practiced repeatedly in meaningful situations. Ancient education naturally relied upon this principle because every lesson connected directly to everyday life. Useful knowledge remains memorable, especially when survival depends upon it. The gathering continues peacefully. Older teenagers now identify edible plants before the elders speak. They notice broken branches suggesting passing animals. They recognize fresh bird calls signaling changes within the forest. Their observations arrive naturally. No one applauds. No one needs to. Competence quietly replaces novelty. As midday approaches, the group rests beside the familiar stream. Cool water slips gently over smooth stones polished by centuries of flowing current. The sound is calming, almost musical, blending beautifully with birdsong drifting through nearby trees. One younger child asks a question. The elder looks toward the young hunter instead. He answers, carefully, patiently, accurately. The elder says nothing, only smiles. That smile carries enormous meaning. Teaching has changed hands. Modern researchers often note that becoming an expert includes learning how to teach others. Explaining a skill requires organizing knowledge differently than simply performing it. Ancient communities almost certainly depended upon this transition. Knowledge trapped inside one person eventually disappears. Knowledge shared becomes inheritance. One fascinating archaeological clue comes from long-occupied campsites where increasingly sophisticated tools appear over many generations without dramatic interruption. Some scholars believe this reflects remarkably stable systems of teaching that allowed practical knowledge to survive across centuries. Exactly how those lessons unfolded remains uncertain. No written manuals survive, only beautifully crafted tools. Someone taught, someone listened. The afternoon sun warms the forest comfortably as everyone begins walking home. Along the trail, the young woman notices several branches leaning dangerously after a recent storm. Without waiting, she carefully moves the children around them. The action lasts only seconds. It echoes years of quiet learning. Back at camp, preparations for the evening meal begin. Smoke rises gently into the clear sky while the familiar aromas of roasted roots, herbs, and fresh mushrooms slowly spread through the valley. The youngest children gather around the fire. The young adults naturally join the adults preparing food. Nobody directs them. Their place has changed. One little girl watches the teenage basket maker weaving fresh reeds into a sturdy carrying basket. Her eyes never leave those moving hands. The young woman notices. She smiles warmly. Without speaking, she places several spare reeds beside the child. Another lesson begins. The circle turns again. Researchers studying apprenticeship frequently describe learning as participation within a community rather than isolated instruction. Individuals gradually move from observing to assisting, then leading, before eventually teaching newcomers. Human societies have repeated this pattern for countless generations, perhaps much longer than we care. As twilight settles across the valley, everyone gathers around the fire once more. The sky glows deep orange before fading into violet. Crickets begin singing while the first stars quietly appear overhead. The elder remains seated, listening. The younger adults tell today's stories. Children laugh. Questions flow naturally. Advice comes gently. The elder speaks only occasionally now, not because wisdom has faded, because it has multiplied. Watching the firelight dance across familiar faces, you realize something quietly profound. Growing up in this ancient world was never about reaching a certain age. It was about reaching a certain trust, the moment when others believed your hands were steady enough, your judgment calm enough, your heart generous enough to protect someone smaller than yourself. That transformation happened so gradually that no one could point to the exact day. Perhaps that is why it mattered so much. Adulthood was never handed to me. It was quietly earned through thousands of ordinary choices. One careful lesson, one patient kindness, one shared burden, one remembered story, until the child who once looked up in wonder eventually became the reassuring face another child would someday look toward. And beneath the same ancient stars, the endless chain of learning continued without a single broken link. Section 18. The morning begins beneath a restless sky. Grey clouds drift low across the valley, pushed steadily by a cool wind arriving from distant mountains. The usual chorus of birds sounds quieter today, interrupted by the long stretches of silence that make every rustling branch seem unusually important. The air carries the scent of approaching rain mixed with damp earth, pine resin, and the fading smoke of breakfast fires. You notice the adults first. Their movements are calm, yet more alert. They pause a little longer before leaving camp. They glance toward the horizon more often than yesterday. Nobody appears frightened, but everyone is paying closer attention. The children sense it too. They do not fully understand why. Still, they instinctively remain closer to the camp. Experience has taught them that unusual mornings deserve careful observation. The elder studies the sky for several quiet moments. Then he gently points toward the western hills. Several adults nod. Plans begin changing. Not dramatically. Quietly. One gathering group shortens its usual route. Hunters decide to remain closer to familiar trails rather than following distant animal tracks. Older children are asked to collect firewood nearer the camp instead of wandering toward the forest's edge. No one complains. Flexibility has always been part of survival. You walk with a small group gathering dry branches beneath tall pines. The forest feels different beneath heavy clouds. Sunlight struggles to reach the ground, leaving soft shadows stretched across thick carpets of moss. The scent of damp bark grows stronger while the wind whispers steadily through the high branches. A little boy stops suddenly. He points toward the ground. Fresh footprints, not human. The older teenager kneels beside them. Large, round, deeply pressed into the soft soil. Bare. The tracks are recent, very recent. The children immediately grow quieter. Nobody panics. The teenager slowly raises one hand. Wait. Every child understands. You have seen this gesture many times before. Now it carries even greater weight. Modern researchers often describe situational awareness as one of humanity's greatest survival skills. Long before written maps or weather forecasts, ancient people constantly interpreted subtle clues left by animals. Changing winds, broken branches, unfamiliar sounds, and shifting clouds. Awareness became habit. Habit protected lives. The teenager studies the tracks for another moment before quietly leading everyone away from the area. He chooses a longer route back toward open ground where visibility is much better. Nobody question him. The younger children simply follow. Months ago, he would have waited for an elder to decide. Today he decides. Responsibility has found him. The breeze grows stronger as the group reaches a grassy hillside overlooking the valley. Tall grasses ripple in silver waves beneath the gathering clouds. Somewhere far away, thunder murmurs so softly that it almost blends into the wind. The youngest children stop to watch. Little girl looks nervous. The teenager notices immediately. Her kneels beside her, points toward the camp visible in the distance, then smiles. Home is close. She smiles back. Fear fades, not because danger disappeared, because trust remained. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies have often noted that experienced individuals frequently adjusted daily routines according to changing environmental conditions. A successful day depended not only upon strength but upon reading countless small signals hidden within the landscape. Historians continue debating exactly how sophisticated prehistoric environmental forecasting became. Ancient people certainly lacked modern instruments, yet generations of careful observation likely created astonishing practical knowledge. Nature spoke constantly. People learned to listen. By midday, the first gentle rain begins falling across the valley. Tiny drops patter softly against broad leaves while the rich smell of wet earth rises all around you. The children laugh quietly as cool rain touches their faces before everyone slips beneath the shelter of several enormous oak trees. Nobody rushes. The adults prepared for this. Animal hides quickly cover baskets filled with gathered food. Stone tools are wrapped carefully. The smallest children stand between older siblings where they remain warm and dry. Preparation turns inconvenience into comfort. One little boy notices that part of a hide has slipped, allowing rainwater to drip onto the baby sleeping peacefully beneath it. Without waiting for instructions, he carefully pulls the hide back into place. The baby never wakes. The older woman beside him notices. She gently squeezes his shoulder. Nothing more. The simple gesture says everything. You protected someone. Researchers who study cooperation often point out that human societies thrive because individuals frequently act before being asked. Anticipating another person's needs strengthens trust and allows communities to respond quickly when circumstances change. Ancient families depended upon exactly this kind of awareness. Small action prevented larger problem. The rain lasts less than an hour. When sunlight finally returns, countless droplets sparkle across the valley like scattered crystals. Birds resume singing almost immediately, and fresh scents of pine moss and flowering shrubs fill every breath. Everything seems renewed, yet the day still has another lesson waiting. As the gathering party begins walking home, they hear a sudden crashing sound deeper within the forest. Branches snap, birds burst into the air. Every conversation stops. The teenager quietly motions for the children to gather behind him. The experienced elder slowly steps beside him. Neither rushes forward. Neither runs away. They listen. Several long heartbeats pass. Then, a small family of wild boar emerges from dense undergrowth before disappearing across another hillside without noticing the people watching from a safe distance. The tension dissolves. Everyone exhales together. The children learned something invaluable. Not every frightening sound requires immediate action. Sometimes patience reveals the answer. One fascinating archaeological mystery involves ancient hunting injuries that healed successfully despite requiring extended care. Researchers continue debating exactly how these individuals survived. Some suggest remarkable community support. Others point towards sophisticated knowledge of rest protection and shared labor. Whatever the explanation, one conclusion appears increasingly clear. People repeatedly risked time, effort, and resources to preserve one another. Life held tremendous value, especially young life. The afternoon sun emerges, fully warming the valley after the passing rain. Steam rises gently from sunlit rocks while butterflies return to flowering meadows as though nothing unusual had happened. The children quickly resume laughing, yet something has changed in them. The little girl who felt nervous beneath the storm clouds now watches the sky more carefully. The boy who adjusted the baby's shelter quietly checks whether the younger toddlers remain close together while walking. Lessons become habits. Habits become character. Back at camp, the returning group is greeted with warm smiles and curious questions. The children eagerly describe the bear tracks, the gentle rain, and the wild boar disappearing into the forest. The younger ones speak excitedly. The older teenager tells the story more calmly. The elder listens, then nods. No one celebrates the encounter. Avoiding danger is success enough. As evening settles over the valley, familiar aromas of roasting roots, fresh herbs, and cedar smoke once again drift through the cooling air. Firelight dances across attentive faces while the first stars appear beyond slowly fading clouds. You sit quietly beside the flames thinking about everything you witnessed today. History often remembers spectacular moments, great hunts, epic migrations, remarkable discoveries, yet humanity also survived because of quieter acts that almost never entered legends. Someone noticed dark clouds, someone changed the day's route, someone recognized fresh tracks, someone stood between danger and a frightened child. Someone covered a sleeping baby before the rain arrived. These ordinary decisions rarely became stories told for generations, yet without them countless future stories might never have existed. Looking around the peaceful camp, you realize that courage was never measured only by confronting danger. Often the greatest courage appeared in choosing caution, protecting others before protecting yourself, and quietly placing the safety of the next generation above every personal comfort. Those unseen choices, repeated across hundreds of thousands of years, carried humanity safely forward. One careful day at a time. Section 19. The valley awakens beneath a brilliant spring sunrise. Golden light pours gently across the grasslands, warming stones that still hold traces of the night's coolness. Thin ribbons of mist drift lazily above the stream before dissolving into the bright morning air. Birds greet the day with confident songs, and the scent of flowering herbs mixes with damp earth and fresh pine carried by a gentle breeze. Everything feels peaceful, comfortably familiar. You realize how much has changed. Not the valley, the people within it. The baby who once slept almost constantly now crawls confidently between familiar faces, laughing whenever older children invent new games. The toddlers who once reached blindly toward dangerous berries now pause, instinctively searching for the approving nod of an experienced adult. The teenagers no longer follow every instruction. They quietly give them. The transformation has been gradual, so gradual that no single sunrise marked the moment. Yet standing here now you can see it clearly. One generation has quietly become the next. You settle beside the fire while breakfast slowly cooks. The smell of roasted roots, crushed herbs, and fresh mushrooms fills the cool morning air. Smoke rises peacefully toward a cloudless sky as children gather around, each carrying something useful. One brings kindling, another carries water, a third proudly delivers a bundle of edible greens. Nobody asked. Helping has become natural. I begin thinking about an extraordinary idea. Every remarkable achievement in human history once depended upon moments exactly like these. Long before people carved statues, built temples, crossed oceans, or reached the stars, someone patiently taught a child how to notice the world. Everything else came later. Anthropologists often describe humans as the ultimate cultural species. Unlike most animals, we inherit far more than instincts. Every generation receives an invisible collection of knowledge accumulated across thousands of earlier lives. How to recognize seasons, how to prepare food, how to cooperate, how to comfort, how to imagine. This inheritance cannot be touched, yet it may be humanity's greatest treasure. Historians continue debating exactly when human culture became sophisticated enough to resemble what we would recognize today. Some evidence suggests astonishing complexity appeared surprisingly early. Other discoveries hint at slower, gradual development, unfolding across immense stretches of time. The precise timeline remains uncertain. The direction does not. Knowledge accumulated. The children nearby provide living proof. A little girl carefully shows a younger boy how to weave two long grasses together without snapping either one. She remembers struggling with the same task only a season ago. Now her fingers move effortlessly. The younger child watches every motion, exactly as she once did. No classroom, no written instructions, only patient hands. Modern researchers studying social learning often emphasize something called cumulative culture. One person discovers an improvement, others preserve it. The next generation adds another small refinement. Over countless generations, tiny advances become extraordinary achievements. No individual invents civilization alone. Everyone contributes, even unknowingly. The breeze shifts gently, carrying the fresh scent of river water across the camp. Dragonflies skim above the stream while butterflies drift among clusters of blooming flowers. The valley feels wonderfully alive. You notice the elder watching the children. He speaks very little today. Mostly he smiles, perhaps because he recognizes something important. His work is continuing without him. Several young adults now teach exactly as he once taught them, not by copying every word, by preserving every intention. That may matter more. Researchers studying oral traditions have observed that successful teaching often balances faithful preservation with thoughtful adaptation. Essential ideas remain stable while methods quietly evolve to fit changing circumstances. Ancient community likely relied upon this flexibility. Rigid traditions eventually break. Living traditions grow. One young hunter returns carrying several straight saplings suitable for future spear shafts. Instead of storing them himself, he immediately begins showing two younger children how to identify wood that bends without cracking. He places one branch across his knee. It snaps. The children laugh. Then he chooses another. This one bends smoothly before returning to its original shape. They touch it carefully. The lesson belongs to them now. Nearby, several girls gather smooth stones from the stream bank. One younger child chooses a beautiful round stone simply because it shines. An older girl smiles, then quietly picks up another. This one grinds grain better. At least that is what her gentle gestures seem to say. Beauty matters. Function matters too. The younger child keeps both. Wisdom rarely demands choosing only one. One fascinating archaeological discovery involves pigments found at prehistoric sites dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Red ochre, black charcoal, and other natural colors appear repeatedly across distant regions. Scholars continue debating exactly how these pigments were used. Body decoration, teaching, storytelling, symbolic meaning. Perhaps many purposes existed simultaneously. Whatever their role, they suggest minds increasingly capable of sharing ideas extending beyond immediate survival. Imagination had arrived. The afternoon sun warms the valley pleasantly. Children invent another game near the stream using smooth stones to create winding paths through the sand. One child pretends the paths represent rivers. Another places tiny sticks across them as bridges. The youngest toddler carefully crawls between them. Everyone cheers. To an outside observer, it appears wonderfully ordinary, yet you cannot help imagining the distant future. One day children will build roads, then cities, then ships, then observatories, then libraries, then laboratories. Every enormous achievement begins inside playful minds, encouraged to explore rather than punished for wondering. Historians still argue about exactly which an innovation most transformed early humanity. Fire, language, tools, cooking, cooperation. Perhaps the question itself misses something important. None flourished alone. Each depended upon people willing to teach children patiently enough that every generation began life slightly farther forward than the last. The baby now toddles uncertainly toward the edge of the fire circle. Immediately 3 older children notice. One gently redirects tiny feet. Another distracts with an interesting feather. The third smiles encouragingly as the little explorer changes direction. No adults intervene. The children have become the caregivers. The circle has quietly completed another turn. The smell of evening supper slowly fills the camp as shadows lengthen across the valley. Roasted roots mingle with fragrant herbs while smoke curls upward beneath a sky turning shades of amber and violet. Everyone gathers around the familiar fire. The youngest lean against trusted shoulders. Teenagers share stories from the day's work. Adults listen. Elders occasionally add a thoughtful observation. Laughter rises easily. The camp feels wonderfully complete. Watching these ordinary moments unfold, you suddenly understand something profound. History is often told through kings' battles, monuments, and inventions. Yet none of those would have existed without countless forgotten caregivers patiently showing children how to survive, how to cooperate, how to wonder, and how to care for one another. Humanity was never shaped only by extraordinary individuals. It was shaped by millions of ordinary mornings, millions of shared meals, millions of gentle corrections, millions of reassuring smiles, and millions of children who grew into adults determined to pass those invisible gifts forward. That quiet chain stretching across hundreds of thousands of years still reaches you today, whether you notice it or not. Section 20. The final morning arrives almost unnoticed. The valley looks much as it always has. Soft mist lingers above the stream before surrendering to the rising sun. Birds greet the day from familiar branches, and the comforting scent of wood smoke drifts gently across the camp. Dew sparkles upon the grass while cool air brushes softly against your face. Nothing extraordinary seems to happen, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. History rarely changes through a single dramatic morning. It changes through ordinary ones. You have spent many days walking beside these ancient families. You have watched babies open curious eyes beneath stitched animal hides. You have followed toddlers taking uncertain first steps across uneven ground. You have smiled as children turned sticks into toys into tools, and tools into responsibilities. Now as the camp begins another ordinary day, you see every stage of that journey standing together. The baby laughs from the safety of familiar arms. Young children chase butterflies through the meadow. Older children carry baskets and firewood without being reminded. Teenagers quietly organize the morning's work. The elders observe with calm satisfaction. No one speaks about the future. They're already building it. The fire crackles gently as breakfast cooks. The familiar aroma of roasted roots, herbs, and mushrooms fills the cool morning air. One little girl carefully stirs a cooking pot while an older boy checks the drying hides stretched between wooden frames. Nearby, the grandmother, who soothed fevers, identified healing plants, and patiently guided tiny hands through their first weaving lessons, smiles as she watches. She rarely intervenes now. She no longer needs to. The children have become capable, not because they memorized rules, because they lived them. Modern anthropology often reminds us that humanity's greatest adaptation was never simply intelligence. It was our extraordinary capacity to cooperate across generations. Unlike almost every other creature, we inherit not only genes, but accumulated experience. Every generation begins where the previous one ended. That simple truth changed the world. Historians still debate many details surrounding early human life. They continue uncovering new fossils, ancient campsites, forgotten footprints, and unexpected discoveries that reshape familiar theories. Questions remain. How exactly did language first flourish? Which traditions spread across continents? How many different childhoods existed among the countless communities living over hundreds of thousands of years? No single answer satisfies every mystery. Perhaps it never will. The past remains wonderfully incomplete. Yet one pattern appears again and again. Children rarely grew alone. You walk one final time beside the stream where so many lessons quietly unfolded. Here toddlers first learned that moving water deserved respect. Here older children practiced placing fish traps beneath patient supervision. Here young adults discovered how changing currents revealed the passing seasons. Now another little child kneels beside the familiar bank. Tiny fingers reach toward the flowing water. Before anyone else moves, an older sister gently places one steady hand against the child's shoulder. The little explorer smiles. The older sister smiles back. The moment lasts only seconds. Then life continues. That tiny gesture carries 300,000 years of memory. Not written memory. Living memory. Across the meadow, Several boys practice throwing rounded training spears toward a circle of sticks. Their aim remains inconsistent, yet each throw improves slightly upon the last. Nearby girls weave baskets while quietly explaining the pattern to younger children eager to imitate every movement. The elders watch. Adults prepare food. Babies sleep peacefully beneath warm hides. The camp breathes together. I begin noticing countless invisible threads connecting every person here. The hunter who once protected frightened children from fresh bear tracks was himself guided across uncertain streams years earlier. The young woman teaching edible plants once hesitated before the same flowers. The older brother, soothing a crying baby, once needed soothing himself. Every caregiver was first a child. Every teacher was first a listener. Every confident adult once searched another face for reassurance. That realization feels unexpectedly comforting. Civilizations would eventually rise. Stone villages would become cities. Bronze would replace stone. Writing would preserve voices. Ships would cross oceans. Libraries would gather knowledge from every corner of the world. Scientific discoveries would transform medicine. Parents would read bedtime stories from printed pages. Teachers would stand before classrooms. Grandparents would share memories through photographs instead of firelight. Yet beneath every astonishing change, something ancient would remain wonderfully familiar. A parent reaching for a frightened child. An older sibling offering patient guidance. A grandparent sharing quiet wisdom. A community believing that the smallest among them deserved protection. The forms changed. The heart remained. One fascinating observation emerges whenever archaeologists uncover traces of ancient childhood. Tiny footprints preserved in hardened mud. Small stone tools shaped by inexperienced hands. Children's teeth buried beside adults who clearly cared for them. These fragile discoveries rarely dominate museum displays, yet they whisper, perhaps the most important story of all. Humanity invested in tomorrow, again and again, even when tomorrow was uncertain. The afternoon slowly gives way to evening. For one final time, the camp gathers around the fire. Smoke curls upward through calm air scented with cedar and fresh herbs. The familiar meal cooks gently while laughter drifts between generations seated comfortably together. No speeches are given. No celebrations announce success. None are necessary. The proof surrounds you. The children are healthy. They are curious. They are learning. They already care for one another. The circle remains unbroken. As darkness settles softly across the valley, you understand why ancient humans risked everything to teach children. Not because every child would become a great hunter. Not because every lesson guaranteed survival. Not because every season would be kind. They taught because knowledge offered hope. They taught because compassion multiplied when shared. They taught because every careful gesture carried tomorrow a little farther forward. Most of all, they taught because somewhere long before anyone could imagine your world, they trusted that someone they would never meet would one day inherit everything they had patiently protected. That someone is you. Has wind down. Now the fire burns lower, its bright flames settling into deep red embers that glow quietly beneath a blanket of soft grey ash. The voices around you become gentle murmurs before gradually fading into peaceful silence. Above, countless stars spread across the endless sky, just as they did for these ancient families watching over sleeping children and patient caregivers alike. You take one slow breath, then another. The cool night air carries the comforting fragrance of cedar smoke, warm earth and distant rain lingering somewhere beyond the hills. Crickets continue their steady song while the nearby stream whispers over smooth stones with the same gentle rhythm it has followed for thousands upon thousands of years. The children sleep safely. The adults rest knowing they have done everything they could for another day. Tomorrow will bring fresh questions, new discoveries, unexpected challenges and quiet joys too, ordinary for history to remember. That is enough. As you slowly leave this ancient valley behind you, carry something invisible with you. Not a stone tool, not a woven basket, not a forgotten story. You carry the quiet understanding that kindness is a patience, careful, teaching and shared responsibility have always been among humanity's greatest strengths. Those ancient fires have long since faded. The valleys have changed. The people have returned to the earth. Yet their gentle wisdom still echoes in every reassuring smile, every bedtime story, every helping hand, and every child encouraged to wonder a little more about the world. The night grows deeper. The stars shine softly above, and somewhere carried gently across hundreds of thousands of years, the oldest lullaby of all still whispers that tomorrow is worth preparing for. Sleep peacefully. The fire will keep watch until morning.